Chapter 949. Roland closed the book and heaved a sigh of relief. The arrival of a large number of sleeping island witches would undoubtedly inject immeasurable vitality into the industrial manufacturing industry of Neverwinter, but there were currently several thorny problems in front of him. The biggest one was the problem of remuneration. They belonged to Sleeping Spell and were, in principle, under the leadership of Tilly. Whether they were willing to accept employment or not depended on their own will. Although Tilly's attitude towards him had changed greatly, Roland felt that it was really hard for him to take back his previous promise and use his relationship with Tilly to order the witches around. In other words, the job planning in the book was only his own plan. How much of it could really be realized depended on how many witches in Sleeping Spell were willing to devote themselves to the tide of production. Nagging them with slogans such as, "Labor is the most glorious," and "Labor changes fate," would certainly have little effect, and saying things like, "for home," was even less meaningful. For them, the only place that could be called home was probably Sleeping Island. Roland believed that as long as one lived here for a few years, anyone would fall in love with this city and regard it as their own. But now was not the time. For newcomers, it was normal to subconsciously be vigilant and worried about a strange place. He could not wait for a few years to develop the industry, so in the end, it was still based on the remuneration. In short, there must be a desire to drive them to work. He had previously inquired from Tilly that the witches on Sleeping Island provided bounty services to merchants or explorers in the fjords. The price was quite expensive, and most of the bounty services ranged from dozens to hundreds of golden dragon. Although the money was used by Tilly to purchase basic living necessities, the witches still used the original fixed distribution system and lived in poverty, but it did not mean that they had never seen money. Moreover, now that 30% of the golden dragon earned from the chaos drinks trade was at Tilly's disposal, it was foreseeable that she would take out a small part to improve the living standards of her witches. In other words, even if the witches did not work, they would not starve to death, and would even live a much better life than on the island. Therefore, relying on a few golden dragon might not be enough. Moreover, Roland was not afraid of low pay, but he was afraid of competition. Most of the witch union salaries were between 1 to 3 golden dragon stones. Why should outsiders pay more? Even if the latter's salary was raised, it would easily attract criticism. The salary hasn't changed much in almost 2 years, but the Sleeping Island witches have raised it as soon as they came. Does the treatment of the old have to be raised by the newcomers? Even if the Alliance members didn't say that, Roland wasn't willing to do that. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but look at Nightingale, who was lying on the recliner and flipping through a comic book. Sensing his gaze, Nightingale turned around slightly. "What's wrong?" "A perfect curve." "No, now is not the time to think about this." Roland cleared his throat. "How long have you been here?" "More than 2 years, 11 months, and 26 days. Nightingale sat up straight. "Why do you ask?" "So precise." "I remember that you were paid 2 golden dragon stones a month at the beginning, right?" "Ah, at that time." She revealed an ambiguous smile. "Yes, twice as much as Anna, and I refused. Later, you begged me repeatedly, and I reluctantly agreed to be your personal guard." "What begging?" "It's obvious that you saw Anna pass her day of adulthood safely. You went back to dissuade Kara, and then fell out with her, so you decided to stay." Roland secretly rolled his eyes. "During these years, have you ever felt that your efforts weren't proportional to your gains? Have you ever considered leaving? What are you trying to say?" The smile on Nightingale's face suddenly froze and was replaced by a trace of panic. "Why should I leave?" "No, it's just an analogy." Roland immediately realized that this sentence could easily cause ambiguity, so he quickly corrected himself. "The point is the first half of the sentence. Will there be witches who think that the salary is too low?" After confirming that he was serious, Nightingale seemed to be relieved and appeared in front of his table. "How is that possible? 1 golden dragon is already half a year's income for ordinary people. We don't work harder than those workers, so naturally, it's not proportional. Besides, even if we get a sum of money, we don't know where to spend it. After all, we don't have to worry about food and clothing. This kind of life is already unimaginable in the past. Perhaps not all witches think so. That's strange. If you don't believe me, you can ask Vendi. Nightingale said confidently. She knows more about the sisters than I do. Okay. Roland shrugged. I also need her opinion on this matter. What matter? She asked curiously. It's a secret, but you'll know soon. Roland smiled. Your Majesty, I've never thought so. Unexpectedly, Vendi's reaction was even more intense after she came. Even if you don't give me a salary, I still want to build this place well. I once said that Neverwinter is the new holy mountain for witches, and the other sisters also have the same expectation to serve you. If City Hall is short of money, I'm willing to give you all the golden dragon I've saved. Well, I'm just collecting opinions. Roland suddenly felt a little touched. He touched his nose and turned his head away. Is there anything in particular that you want? Well, Vendi was stunned for a moment, while Nightingale quickly blinked at her. If I have to say, I think, well, maybe if I could have one more bottle of chaos drink every month, that would be great. You too? Roland looked at Nightingale. Are you playing a wishing game? Nightingale chuckled. Since you're just saying, I think 2 bottles would be better. As expected, he had a general framework for the reform of witches' remuneration in his mind. If there was anything more precious than money, it would be the things that money could not buy. Although there were many witches patronizing Evelyn's 100 Flavors wine house, the high prices made most of them flinch, and they would instead choose the cheaper fruit wine. It wasn't that they couldn't afford it, but their consumption philosophy would prevent them from investing large amounts of gold royals in such luxury goods. Moreover, the chaos drinks sold in the wine house were all old varieties, and the low sales made it difficult to replace the stock. In terms of freshness, it was not as good as the new products released every month. What if the chaos drinks, which were originally a welfare benefit, became a special purchase item? It could be called a points system or a dual currency system. Witches could get exclusive rewards through work, and then use this reward to exchange for something that Golden Dragon could not buy. Wouldn't the work itself be attractive? At the same time, it could avoid the feeling of disparity caused by raising the salary. In addition, chaos drinks weren't the only special items he could purchase. He had countless ideas in his head that could ensure that they wouldn't be imitated by others as long as they were attractive enough. There was no one else he could find that could do it. Chapter 950. After finalizing the payment, Roland planned to tear down another obstacle on the road to great development. That was to formulate standard units. The universal education in Neverwinter had already incorporated millimeters, centimeters, meters, kilometers, and other units into the textbooks to replace the original inches, feet, and feet, which was quite effective. Especially in the construction and industrial production departments, measuring instruments made with the new units were more accurate and had been widely accepted. The 1 centimeter standard prototype, which was an iron bar as wide as Roland's fingernail, was kept in the castle study. What he needed to do next was to integrate the other units and promote them to the whole country of Grey Castle. The reason why he took this step now was that the previous production and education levels were not urgent for other new units, and it was difficult to replicate the technology. After all, it was meaningless to have standards. If they could not be made into measuring instruments, people would not be able to use them in real life. But now, these difficulties were no longer a problem. For example, 1 cubic decimeter container was defined as 1 liter, and 1 liter of water was defined as 1 kilogram. Another example was to define 1 meter long pendulum's period as 1 second. The former could use a hummingbird to accurately replicate a kilogram prototype of the same weight, and the latter could be used to measure time using a pendulum clock. As long as there were prototypes and models, the factories in Neverwinter could produce a large number of replicas. Otherwise, it would be a waste of time and energy to rely on Anna to make all the measuring instruments. When the industrial technology reached a certain level, the popularization of more accurate measurement units became a matter of course. He was not worried that these standards were not pure enough. In fact, the standard prototypes used in human history were constantly changing with the progress of the times. 3 days later, Iron Axe finally led the Eastern Front army back to Neverwinter. At the same time, Echo, who had been in the port of Clearwater for nearly half a year, arrived. Roland looked at the two Sand Nation people who were reporting to him in front of his desk and sighed slightly in his heart. Both of them were originally sinners who had been exiled from their families. One had concealed his identity and wandered to Border Town, relying on hunting for a living. The other had been sold as a slave and lived a tormented life. But now, they were indispensable members of the senior management of Neverwinter. Iron Axe, who had shouldered the heavy responsibility alone and had been busy outside for several months, did not show any signs of fatigue on his face. On the contrary, he was in high spirits because of the war, and his every movement was like that of a general. Echo's change was even more obvious. The shadow that her life as a slave had cast on her gradually faded away. Her blue-gray eyes were now shining with confidence, and her temperament was more and more in line with her position as the chief of OSHA. Sure enough, experience could change a person. Echo's report was very simple. The Wild Flame clan had fulfilled their agreement, and the first batch of migration teams had already settled in the port of Clearwater. Influenced by the number 1 clan in Iron Sand City, many other small clans came to her and expressed their willingness to work for the Great Chief. The whole plan went very smoothly. By the end of the year, the population of the port of Clearwater was estimated to reach 30,000 people, which was already comparable to the population of the old King City. She also brought a letter from Spear, the Lord of Fallen Dragon Ridge. It was obvious that she was here to ask for food. Spear said that she's just the manager of a small fief and doesn't have any experience in taking care of so many people. She's been under a lot of pressure recently. Echo imitated Spear's tone and said, although the experienced people sent by City Hall are useful, according to their suggestion, we need at least 200 to 300 clerks to accommodate so many migrants. If your Majesty doesn't take care of her, she'll have the urge to throw away her burden and run to Neverwinter to be a common witch. Roland could not help but chuckle. Being a common witch doesn't mean being idle. So Roya and Leaf are waiting for you. If you don't use up your magic power every day, how can you be worthy of the magic channel? I see. I'll give her more of the new officials who passed the review. You've worked hard this time. Take a good rest for a few days. She bowed and then asked expectantly, by the way, Your Majesty, have you recently composed any new songs? You can sing all of the previous ones? Yes. They're very effective, especially when it comes to inspiring people, Echo replied with a smile. And when I'm confused, I'll sing the songs you taught me. If it weren't for those songs, I'm afraid I wouldn't have lasted until today. It seemed that coordinating relations between clans and maintaining order in the Southern Territory was not as easy as she had reported. But she had borne all the difficulties and setbacks alone. I see, Roland said slowly. I'll have someone copy the new songs and send them to your room. Echo bowed deeply and said, That's great. Thank you. Even if he knew nothing about music, he could still search for it in the dream world. He could not say no to such a request. After Echo left, Roland looked at Iron Axe. You've worked hard too. No, Your Majesty. Iron Axe hurriedly put his hand on his chest and said, It's my duty to fight for you. Not only did I not feel tired, but I actually enjoyed it. Really? Roland smiled and did not deny it. What happened to the nobles who fled to Seawinshire? You didn't burn them down again, did you? I wanted to do that, but they ran too fast, Iron Axe said seriously. By the time the First Army cleared Valencia and arrived at Seawinshire, the suburbs had become a wasteland. Not only that, but several granaries in the city were also set on fire. Obviously, they would rather destroy the city than hand it over to you intact. This was probably the last revenge of the Rebel King's faction. He thought that if the Eastern Front Army hadn't made sufficient preparations and had dozens of cement carriers working day and night to provide supplies, they would have had no choice but to retreat at this point. Otherwise, the city people who lacked food would regard the First Army as a target to loot. Once they fired, it would be difficult to restore order. Where did they escape to? Some to the fjords, and some to the other 3 kingdoms, Iron Axe replied regretfully. It's a pity that the First Army doesn't have ships. Otherwise, I wouldn't have let them go. Don't worry. As long as they dare to use their original surnames, I'll get rid of them sooner or later, Roland said slowly. At least those who fled to the Kingdom of Dawn were no different from flies who threw themselves into a trap. This group of people was probably Timothy's last loyal followers. He was not worried that they would make a comeback. He just felt that they were an eyesore. After asking about the aftermath of the Eastern region, Roland suddenly thought of a previous question. By the way, tricking the nobles into prison and then pretending to burn them down. Is this your idea? Chapter 951. By the way, let's talk about the update. Some people always say that I write slowly, that I'm arrogant and complacent, that I don't put the readers in my eyes. I'm really June flying snow. I'm wrongly accused. The truth is I spend 4 to 5 hours a day on writing. It's always hard to satisfy myself by cutting and subtracting, and that doesn't include the time to think. Every time I ask for leave, I'm anxious and uneasy. Every time I'm stuck, I'm mentally exhausted. Especially now that the plot has reached this stage, there are always a lot of things to consider. Naturally, my speed is not as fast as before. I don't want to fail this book, nor do I want to not fill in the gaps. My ability is limited, and I've never written such a long story before. But I still want to write it well, and show this world that I've been imagining for a long time to everyone. I know that this speed is not suitable for the pace of online literature, so I don't want to ask for monthly votes or tips. I only hope that everyone can accompany me to the end. Chapter 952. Your Majesty, I. To Roland's surprise, Iron Axe did not blurt out the answer as he usually did. Instead, he seemed rather hesitant, which was rare for the commander-in-chief of the First Army. Roland had only asked casually, but now he became interested. He didn't think that Iron Axe had any ulterior motives. Moreover, being fully in charge of Iron Axe included the means of punishment, so there was no essential difference between burning or hanging. What he was curious about was that since it wasn't a violation of the order, the other party's hesitation was worth pondering. However, he did not continue to pressure Iron Axe. He just leaned back in his chair and waited for Iron Axe's answer. After hesitating for a while, Iron Axe suddenly knelt down and said, "No, Your Majesty. It was Miss Edith who proposed the plan to eliminate the enemy nobles, but I was the one who carried it out, so I should take full responsibility." Edith? Roland was stunned. Is this the plan of the general staff? No, I did not see anything related to this in the plan, so, is it a private message? In an instant, he understood the reason for the other party's hesitation. In this era where private soldiers were prevalent, anything related to the army was a taboo for the Lord. It was taboo for outsiders to intervene, even if it was a suggestion or reminder that would help the war. If this had happened in the territory of other nobles, the one who proposed it in private would have been punished. Iron Axe did not want to implicate Edith, nor did he want to cover it up with a lie, so he hesitated. I see. You handled the war on the Eastern Front very well. City Hall will give you a reward according to the results of the war. You can go now. Iron Axe was stunned and asked, Your Majesty, won't you punish me? Roland could not help laughing and asked, Why? Did you violate any of the rules? My order is to eliminate the rebels in the Eastern region and bring their cities under my rule. You can act according to the circumstances. He paused. If you heard 2 of your soldiers discussing the war situation while you were patrolling the camp, and you took their advice, should I punish you and these 2 people? Besides, Edith is a member of the general staff, so it's normal for her to have ideas about the war plan. So, you think we're not at fault? Iron Axe couldn't help but raise his head. I didn't say that. Roland shrugged. Just because you don't have any problems doesn't mean Edith doesn't. But what happens next has nothing to do with you. Go back and have a good rest. Iron Axe opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but in the end, he chose to obey the order under Roland's gaze. Yes, Your Majesty. As soon as the commander-in-chief of the First Army left, Roland immediately called the city hall. Tell Edith to come to the castle. In less than a quarter of an hour, the Pearl of the Northern Region appeared at the office door. "Your Majesty, this is my responsibility," Edith said. "I'm willing to accept any punishment you give me." Roland looked at her with interest. "I haven't even opened my mouth and you already know what I'm going to say?" "As soon as the Eastern Front Army returns to Neverwinter, the first person you summon will definitely be Iron Axe. If he hadn't reported to you about the burning of the nobles, I don't think you would have summoned me so quickly." It's so easy to talk to smart people, Roland thought. Moreover, looking at her magnanimous appearance, he could not help but feel that she was a loyal minister who was wronged for the country. However, the smarter a person was, the easier it was to fall into a dead end that he had built himself. First of all, I asked him about this. After all, it's not his style to trick the nobles together and then disguise it as a fire scene. Besides, since you feel that you're responsible, what's the problem? I made an informal appointment with the commander-in-chief of the First Army, and I didn't apply to you. Wrong, Roland interrupted her directly. Your problem is that you violated the regulations of the advisor department. According to the regulations, any battle plan must be recorded on paper and submitted to me for review. Edith obviously did not expect him to say this. She could not help but widen her eyes. Your Majesty? Isn't it? But the Pearl of the Northern Region looked puzzled. Once it's carried out in your name, won't it become your doing in the eyes of other officials? You're right. Roland raised the corner of his mouth. What's the problem? This. Like Iron Axe, Edith also showed a rare look of confusion. Although they're rebels, they're also nobles. In the eyes of some nobles, I'm afraid what you did. I know what you want to say. Roland waved his hand. But if even I can't handle it, do you think you can bear the backlash? Relax, I just want to discuss with you. Do you really think it's right to make your subordinates take the blame when there's a problem? Take the blame? Ahem, you can think of it as shirking responsibility. Roland explained stiffly. Back to this matter, I did it for the Kingdom of Grey Castle. In the end, not only did I not get the honor, but I also had to die because of it. But I felt at ease and even applauded. If other people knew, would those officials still be loyal to me? Edith fell silent. So the king is the most suitable person to take the blame. Only in this way, the subordinates will not have any burden when they do things. Because of this, I need to review the final plan of the advisor department, even if it's something I'm not good at. Do you understand? After a while, the Pearl of the Northern Region nodded and responded, I was too arrogant. The punishment for violating the regulations is that all the credit for this two-front offensive will be revoked, and you could have been promoted. Roland took a sip of tea. This matter ends here. You can continue with your work. Yes, please allow me to leave. Edith placed her hand on her chest and bowed. So, you've worked for nothing this time? Cole Kant carefully pushed the honey mushroom in front of Edith, and then watched as she stabbed her fork into the mushroom slices. The other colleagues were promoted, but you didn't? Yes, I didn't. The Pearl of the Northern Region chewed on the browned bird beak mushroom as if she was venting her dissatisfaction with her dinner. Listen to what His Majesty said. If even I can't withstand it, can you withstand it? It's precisely because I can't withstand it that I need an outlet. Of course, if it was a lord like my father, I would never do this. I knew that His Majesty would not ignore it, so I felt that this investment wouldn't be too bad, and the risk was manageable. But with a few words, he dispelled all my plans. He even said that I was thinking too much. Are all idealists so naive? Sister, are you angry? Cole wiped the sweat off his forehead. But can't you tell? Edith stared at him. Cole quickly shrank his neck. It was the first time he saw his sister show such an expression on a non-banquet occasion. After living with her for more than 10 years, Cole clearly knew how much his sister loved power. If it was really as she said, and she had lost a chance to be promoted because of this, it would be normal for her to be angry, resentful, or disappointed. But her expression told him otherwise. It was more like a strange smile mixed with anger. And if he did not get it wrong, this kind of complaint was usually called a coquettish grumble. Thinking of this, Cole could not help but shiver. The Pearl of the Northern Region, who was always indifferent or scheming against her opponents, could actually grumble? And unlike her pretense at the banquet, she seemed to be completely unaware of her current expression. Was this still the Edith Conti was familiar with? Edith did not get an answer for a long time. She dangerously narrowed her eyes. Cole immediately felt the hair on his back stand up. No, she was still his sister. There was no mistaking it. I just think. His Majesty might have his own considerations? Let him be. The Pearl of the Northern Region put the last piece of mushroom into her mouth. I'd like to see how high an idealist can go. But what? Cole had a vague premonition. Chapter 953. The new, sleeping spell, was not just a single building, but a residential area covering an area of about 7,000 square meters. As a key new residential area, it was not only equipped with artesian running water and heating, but also a 4-story frame house with well-developed concrete casting technology. Its interior division was exactly the same as that of the Witch Building. In addition, Roland had also built a 2-story conference hall in the center of the community for the witches of Sleeping Island to carry out their activities. In fact, on the night before the migrants arrived in Neverwinter, the welcome banquet was held here. After half a month, the hall was once again full of witches. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Tilly walked to the podium and began to read the recruitment order from Roland Wimbledon, as well as a new salary system. This is the current work arrangement. The sleeping spell can get 30% of the income generated by the witches. The money will be used to improve everyone's life, expand the scale of the sleeping spell, and other aspects that will be needed in the future. Princess Tilly smiled and said with fervor and assurance, "At first glance, it seems that I'm being exploited by my brother. After all, when we were on Sleeping Island, the commission paid by the fjord's merchants all belonged to us. But in fact, the merchants would also take the opportunity to put forward many additional conditions, such as buying their food and daily necessities at a high price and often giving us a discount. But there aren't so many additional conditions here. In addition, the 30% given by Roland is already more than the income of Sleeping Island. In addition, most of the new work only needs to consume magic power, and we don't have to personally go to the unknown sea to take risks, so it's much easier. Comparing the two, we can conclude that I'm not the one being exploited, and it can even be said that I'm taking advantage of my brother." This sentence caused a low burst of laughter. But Tilly suddenly raised her voice. "All this has nothing to do with the remuneration that I'm going to talk about. Previously, no matter how much the remuneration was paid by the fjord's merchants, the sleeping spell, which lacked everything, could only use it as a whole. So in the end, only bread, cotton and other things were distributed uniformly to everyone. But this time, everyone will get a tangible return, instead of a series of invisible and intangible numbers. As for how to use them, it's your freedom. Now, please open the envelopes on your tables." Molly had long noticed the envelope stamped with the seal of the Grey Castle Tower, but she refrained from touching it. Now that she heard Royal Highness Tilly's request, she couldn't wait to tear open the envelope. "This is the new Gwent deck?" Shadow, who was sitting at the side, craned his head over. "You have one too? Go look at yourself." Molly turned her body to the side, blocking his gaze. Tisk. Inside the envelope was a piece of paper the size of a palm. It looked extremely smooth, but it was bumpy to the touch. It could be easily bent, but it would not leave creases like ordinary paper. The moment Molly saw it, she fell in love with it. It was a work of art. Although it was similar in size to the popular Gwent cards in the Witch Union, she did not think the two were the same. It was because the latter was simply too exquisite. Not only were the patterns gorgeous, but they were also extremely complicated, as if they were lines drawn with strands of hair. And these lines were not only used to fill the surface of the paper, but also formed a variety of patterns and words. For example, the front of the paper was the emblem of a tower and a spear, and the back was a mountain illuminated by the rising sun. Below the patterns were written the words, "Issued by the royal family of Grey Castle," and "Exclusive for witches," and the other four corners were written with 3 10s and an unknown symbol. What Molly loved the most was that when she slowly turned the paper, the patterns on both sides would refract gold under the light, as if the lines were carved out of gold. It doesn't seem to be Gwent. Shadow also noticed the difference. I remember the numbers on the cards are marked on the same side. Is this a gift from His Majesty? But Lady Tilly clearly said it was a reward. Well, yours is the same? Orbit, who was on the other side, also came over. It should be the same for everyone. What does this symbol mean? I don't know, but I feel like I've seen it somewhere before. Whispers rose and fell in the hall. All the witches were attracted by the gorgeous paper in their hands, and only when Tilly spoke again did the discussion slightly subside. The thing in your hands is called paper money. Just like the name, it has the same function as money. The difference is that this kind of paper money is only issued to witches, and can only be used by witches. You mean, it's a golden dragon made of paper? Someone asked. There's no harm in understanding it that way, but it can be used to buy some things that the golden dragon can't easily buy. Tilly nodded. For example, the $10 paper in your hands can be exchanged for a whole bottle of chaos drink or 5 strawberry ice creams in the castle district. Molly couldn't help but swallow her saliva. She still deeply remembered the delicious food she had eaten at the welcome banquet. It could be said that she had never imagined the taste of it in her life. Especially the latter, the round pink color, the soft and cold texture, and the sweet and enchanting aroma, almost put together all the beautiful words she could think of. Compared with the ice cream, the fishy salted fish soup on the Fjord Islands could not even be called food. And this beautiful paper money could be exchanged for unforgettable delicious food, and in fact it was 5 servings? Judging from the lively response in the hall, she was not the only witch who was very interested in this. Of course, the things you can exchange for are not only food, but also daily clothes, things you use. As long as it's a new product made in Neverwinter, it will first appear in the shops in the castle district. Tilly then said loudly, in short, the paper money is the reward for responding to the recruitment. According to the different working hours, the reward will also vary. I have to point out that it's not a necessity for living. Even if you don't work, you can live a comfortable life. To be precise, it's an embellishment or a reward to make life richer. Therefore, the choice is up to you, whether you accept the recruitment or not, it's up to you. Unexpectedly, there was no noisy discussion in the hall, probably because they knew that their leader still had something to say, so all the witches focused their attention on Tilly. But my sisters, this matter is not only about enjoyment. Tilly's tone softened. Do you remember the unfair treatment we suffered after we awakened as witches? At that time, I'm afraid that everyone had the same thought. It would be great if there was a place where witches and ordinary people could live together. Chapter 954. Molly couldn't help but nod. In the past half a month, what impressed her the most was the attitude of the ordinary citizens towards witches. They were not pretending to be familiar with her, nor were they indifferent to her. Instead, they were half curious and half used to it. A few days ago, when she was wandering in the harbor area, a gust of wind blew down the empty wooden boxes on the pier. She subconsciously summoned her magic servant to catch the falling boxes. Not only did the busy crowd not run away screaming, but they also showed great interest in this transparent legless giant. This was an unprecedented experience for Molly. Even in Sleeping Island, the islanders who had migrated here had never been so close to witches. Although they still followed Princess Tilly's orders on the surface, in fact, witches were still different in their hearts. Most of the fjord's people kept a respectful distance from witches. Only explorers and some businessmen did not mind the power they possessed. As for the mainland of the kingdom, which was deeply influenced by the church, it was even worse for them. When Lotus first brought back the news of the western region of Grey Castle, Molly was still skeptical. It was not until she came here that she realized those stories were too conservative. Especially when she saw Lotus leading a large group of people to climb up and down tall buildings, Evelyn running a tavern that was always very lively at any time, and Candle, who used to be regarded as a useless person, was welcomed by the people in the factory. Molly felt a trace of sincere envy. If it were not for fear of disturbing Princess Tilly, Molly would have taken the initiative to find a job. Anyway, she had never been idle when she was on Sleeping Island. In addition, don't forget that we still have the biggest enemy, the demons. Tilly looked around. You already know the meaning of the battle of divine will. Even the Church of Hermes is not worth mentioning in front of such an enemy. Therefore, not all of you work for your own pleasure. Every note represents your contribution to Neverwinter and even the entire human world. For witches, this will be an honor, because everyone can use this opportunity to prove to the world that witches are also an indispensable part of the human race, even an important part. She raised her right hand and clenched her fist. Sisters who are willing to be recruited, please come to the stage now. A total of 69 out of 86 jobs have been accepted. This result should be pretty good. After the meeting, Tilly handed the list to Vendi and said, most of the remaining observers are hesitant. If we give them more time, I believe more people will accept Neverwinter's recruitment. It's more than good, Vendi said excitedly. It's beyond His Majesty's expectations. Tilly asked curiously, how much did he guess? Vendi smiled and held up 3 fingers. 30 people? Tilly said indignantly, he's underestimating the sleeping spell. Rather than saying that he underestimated everyone's enthusiasm, it is better to say that it is your credit. Vendi put away her smile and bowed seriously to Princess Wu. You did not have to say the latter words. If it was just a simple introduction of the recruitment process, 30 people might be an optimistic guess. However, it was Tilly's words of, for the sake of other sisters and to improve the reputation of witches, that moved most of the people present. As a former caretaker of the Witch Cooperation Association, Vendi naturally knew what her companions lacked the most. Apart from a stable place to live, the rest was the recognition of others. After all, they had lived as ordinary people for more than 10 years, and it was not so easy to completely cut off the past. I said that for myself. Tilly smiled and shook her head. I saw a lot of interesting things from Roland, and I also know what an incredible city this is. If we lose the battle of divine will, won't all these things be lost? So even if I want to see more miracles, I have to do my part. Before the doomsday winter comes, it's wise to hug each other tightly to keep warm, isn't it? You're right. Vendi also smiled. It's a pity that not everyone will agree with me. Tilly shrugged helplessly. For example, those witches in the eastern region. It's very likely that they won't accept the recruitment in the end. You mean the small group headed by Azima? Vendi was puzzled. Since she doesn't get along with you, why did she go to the fjords with you? It wasn't like that at the beginning. Princess Wu sighed. Long before they joined Sleeping Island, they knew the Bloodfang Association. During the escape, the latter helped them many times to repel the church's pursuers. Therefore, Azima and the others trusted Heidi Morgan very much. This was nothing, but later, as the conflict between the Bloodfang Association and the sleeping spell broke out, a rift appeared. I see. And I directly attacked Heidi without informing everyone, which made Azima even more resentful. So when they asked to board the Sleeping Beauty to leave Sleeping Island, I agreed. Tilly said slowly, in fact, if it weren't for Scroll, they would probably have left Neverwinter. That's not your fault, Vendi comforted her. Heidi Morgan deserved it. She deceived the witches in the kingdom of Wolfheart. But it's also a fact that she helped Azima. Tilly did not seem to want to dwell on this. If it were me, I might also have a grudge. After all, they're not bad at heart. Well, Vendi pondered for a moment. I may have a way to persuade them, but what? It may help them get rid of the sleeping spell. That's no different from now, Tilly said frankly. If it's good for Roland and them, just do it. Is this really a good idea? After returning to the residential building, Doris looked worried. We've already offended Lady Tilly, and now we've refused the job of the Lord of Neverwinter. If we completely annoy him, I'm afraid we'll all. Several other witches from the eastern region echoed her words. I think Doris is right. Roland Wimbledon isn't an ordinary lord. He's now the king of Grey Castle. Even if we can return to the eastern region, it'll already be his territory. And we're not combat witches. Once he attacks us, we won't be able to resist at all. Come on, even if you can fight, can you defeat that lunatic Ashes? I bet she's been sick of us for a long time. Actually, I think the Witch Union is quite nice to us. Don't even think about it. They'll definitely side with the king. We'll be lucky if they don't help His Majesty arrest us. Stop talking. Azima interrupted their argument. Roland Wimbledon will never use tough means. Otherwise, the image he's built up will be in vain. If we agree to the recruitment order, what's the use of our previous insistence? In the end, we'll have to rely on the sleeping spell. In the eyes of outsiders, we're no different from other witches. While saying this, Azima felt a little conflicted. In all fairness, the Witch Union had helped them a lot in the past 2 weeks. They didn't bully them as she had expected, but treated them equally. Even the witch named Vendi had come to talk to her several times about the matter. Vendi's kindness really made Azima feel a sense of home, which she hadn't felt for a long time. But Azima knew she could only continue to be indifferent. She had a hunch that once she opened her mouth, it would be difficult for her to escape from the sleeping spell. Just then there was a knock on the door. Who is it? She turned around impatiently. Chapter 955. After closing the door, Vendi glanced at everyone and finally fixed her eyes on Azima. Just say what you want, Azima said stiffly. If you're here for today's recruitment order, then don't try to persuade us. We won't change our minds. Azima. Doris could not help but whisper. She raised her hand and stopped Doris. I'll remember your care for us in the past half a month, but they're not the same thing. As I said when I first came to Neverwinter, since the church has been destroyed, I'll leave the western region sooner or later. Compared to this, I want to tell you a piece of good news first. Vendi's gentle expression did not change at all. City Hall received a report that a large group of refugees from the eastern region will arrive in Neverwinter in a week. There are as many as 12,000 of them. And this time, some of your relatives are likely to be among them. The living room suddenly burst into an uproar. Is what you said true? Of course. In order to bring them back, the shipping department has spared no effort, Vendi said with a smile. The Redwater River is full of cement boats bound for the eastern region. They are not only filled with dry materials but also prepared with winter supplies. After all, it's autumn now. I used to live in Archbridge Town. Are there people from this town among the immigrants? What's the situation in Valencia? It must be a mess. I hope my family isn't among them. It was my father who drove me out. He was also bewitched by the church. Maybe he regrets it now. Everyone was talking at the same time. Don't worry, there are 12,000 people. Vendi clapped her hands and said, they cover almost all the towns from Valencia to Seawinshire. It's hard not to find a fellow countryman. When Scroll finishes the statistics, she can immediately screen out people who are related to you. It doesn't matter even if there is no one in this batch. This migration is just the beginning. There will be more and more people coming to Neverwinter in the future. As long as you stay here, you'll meet them one day. Then she looked at the witch who looked confused. It's okay if you don't want to recognize me. But I think it's better to have some news than no news at all, right, White Pear? At least when they regret it, it will give them a chance to make up for it. You're right. The girl called Bailey lowered her head in embarrassment. Are you really going to move the entire eastern region to Neverwinter? Azima asked in surprise. It's not just the eastern region. Vendi smiled. The northern region, the southern region, and the central region of the kingdom are also part of the relocation plan. Only a few big cities will remain in these territories, while the residents of the towns and villages will gather in the cities. Why did His Majesty go through so much trouble? It's complicated to explain. I think it's called urbanization. In the past, due to food problems, a large area of farmland was needed to support a city, so the population was very scattered. But now, food is no longer a problem, and those villages and towns that occupy the majority of the population are in an administrative blank zone, unable to be effectively organized and utilized. Therefore, we have them move closer to the city, which is more conducive to the power of City Hall. Vendi patiently replied, because of this, the Western region is no longer the Western region in the past. If you leave, what will happen to your companions? Do you want them to leave their families and wander in the deserted hometown with you? Azima frowned and did not answer. To put it bluntly, it's just cowardice. Just then, another cold voice came from behind them. The witch's expressions suddenly changed. They turned around and saw a woman shrouded in a black robe appear at the square table in the living room. She leaned forward slightly, crossed her legs, and supported her chin with one hand. She looked at the witches with great interest, as if she did not care about their vigilance at all. Who are you? Azima asked in a low voice. Nightingale. What are you talking about? Vendi said anxiously, don't worry, everyone. She means no harm. She's just an alliance who is responsible for protecting me secretly. Am I wrong? She took off her hood, revealing her beautiful blonde curls. Why are they hesitating? It's just because of the Blood Fang Association that they don't want to work for Princess Tilly anymore. But in fact, they're still relying on the sleeping spell and have no intention of changing. That's nonsense. Azima could not help clenching her fists. If it weren't for Doris, we would have left long ago. Besides, what do you know about the Blood Fang Association and the Sleeping Island? Really? Nightingale raised her eyebrows. Then why don't you work? What? Let's do the math. The travel and food expenses on the way from Neverwinter to the eastern region are about 20 silver royals per person. After arriving at the destination, we'll need to spend 10 to 20 bronze royals on food every day. But don't forget, because of the war and migration, most of the villages there have become wastelands. If you want to live now, the cost will be dozens of times higher than before, which is why the refugees flock to Neverwinter. She said unhurriedly, in other words, it's not easy to leave the sleeping spell without a bag of golden dragon. If it were me, I would definitely seize this opportunity to apply for jobs everywhere and strive to get as much money as possible. This is also the basis for the independent survival of the team. But look at you. What have you done in the past half a month? Not only did you enjoy the food provided by the sleeping spell, but you also waited for Her Highness Tilly to send the travel expenses to you? Azima was stunned for a moment. She wanted to refute but did not know where to start. Let me say, this is cowardice. So, under the pressure of the church, you turned to the Blood Fang Association. Because of this insignificant relationship, you secretly felt indignant for the destruction of Heidi Morgan, but did not dare to stand out and confront the extraordinary. Nightingale shrugged. I really don't know the relationship between the Blood Fang Association and the Sleeping Island, but the members of the Blood Fang Association know, and they're all in Neverwinter now. Do you really think Heidi treats you as a sister? Nightingale. Enough. Vendi stopped her. If I were in a faraway place, I'd also need to win over the support of the local people, not to mention that your ability is of great help to them. If I don't eliminate the church's spies, I'll inevitably attract more people to besiege me. In short, you were just grasshoppers on a rope. If Heidi really treated you that well, I just want to ask, did she inform you when she planned to overthrow Tilly on the Sleeping Island? Azima bit her lip. If you really want to prove your determination, you'd better start from the basics. You can find a lot of excuses when you were on the deserted island, but here, the sleeping spell can no longer restrain you. Chapter 956. Sorry, she's always been straightforward. She didn't mean any harm, Vendi hurriedly apologized. You don't have to take her words to heart. If you get rid of sleeping spell, you'll live a much more difficult life. However, none of the witches responded, especially Azima. Her face was extremely pale, and her chest was heaving up and down, showing that she was in a state of intense emotional turmoil. If it was just an ordinary sarcasm, she would have laughed contemptuously or argued with the person who mocked her, but Nightingale's words made her unable to say a single word. Apart from the accusation of cowardice, the other words pierced her heart like nails. When they were still wandering in the eastern region, they had indeed spent a lot of energy in order to survive. Every day, She was like an invisible mouse, holding a copper plate in her hand, looking for other lost copper royals, and then exchanging them for bread and other food. If she were alone, she could live in any town, but she had many companions to take care of. When the harvest was not enough for a day, everyone had to starve. Azima believed that she was not a coward. Otherwise, she would not have had the courage to leave her home and go to an unknown territory alone. Similarly, she would not have met so many companions and become their leader. However, Nightingale was right. Ever since she met the Bloodfang Association, her group had gradually lost its independence. After all, it was much faster for the combat witches to directly deal with the mice than to rely on their ability to pick up scraps to survive. If they were lucky, the coins they could snatch in one day would be enough to cover half a month of her busy work. They only needed her guidance when they were traveling in the desolate wilderness. Moreover, the strong fighting ability of the sleeping spell had also ensured their safety. As a result, she no longer cared about how many copper royals she had in her pocket, whether it was enough to buy food for the journey, or whether she could support a commission with a caravan. After they reunited with the main force, this situation did not change. After a while, Azima gritted her teeth and asked, "How hard is it?" "I don't know the specific amount of living funds that sleeping spell will provide in the future, but it should not be lower than the standard of the Witch Union. That is, at least one golden dragon a month, which is already 4 to 5 times that of ordinary people," Vendi said worriedly. Moreover, this income also includes food and accommodation expenses, so there's even less for free spending. Most importantly, even if you break free from the sleeping spell, the Witch Union will not be able to accept you for the time being. The reason is very simple. His Majesty doesn't want a rift between the Witch Union and sleeping spell, and this kind of thing itself is very easy to misunderstand. "That's it?" she interrupted angrily. 20 silver royals a month, that's 120 for everyone. Does she think I can't do it? Stop joking. I'm not some young lady of noble birth. In order to exchange for a bit of food, I've even rummaged through the sewers and garbage dumps. Why would I be afraid of this little hardship? No, this was nothing at all. If you don't believe me, watch carefully, Nightingale. I know you're still here. Miss Azima. Vendi was about to persuade her again, but Doris stopped her. I know you're doing this for our own good, but I also think what we did before was a little too much. After hearing what Miss Nightingale said, I still feel a little embarrassed. She touched her slightly red cheeks in embarrassment and said in a low voice, "Perhaps Heidi Morgan really doesn't take us seriously as she said, but we can't go on like this. I support Azima's decision this time." Me too. If Azima is a coward, then what are we? Me too. Everyone nodded. I've made up my mind. I want to leave the sleeping spell. Not only do I want to survive, but I also want to pay back what I owe them. Azima looked around the room and said with hatred, "You'll have to swallow your words, Nightingale." Vendi sighed. After a long silence, she said, "Now that you've made your choice, I'll explain it to Her Highness Tilly. In addition, I'll try my best to apply to His Majesty to keep your special salaries. In this way, when you accept the witch's recruitment, you'll get some special notes. Life will be much easier this way." Azima turned her head stiffly and said, "As you wish." Walking out of the community, Vendi could not help but let out a long sigh. "What's wrong?" Nightingale's voice came from behind. "Nothing. I just suddenly feel a little ashamed," she murmured. She muttered, "I'm not what they think I am. I want them to work for His Majesty Roland." "But you still did it, didn't you? Because you know it's better for everyone. If you continue to maintain the status quo, their resistance will affect Her Highness Tilly, which will be harmful to the sleeping spell." Nightingale appeared. "I've seen too many people like this. It's far more effective to beat them up than to persuade them with kind words. Some of the more stubborn ones won't repent until they're at death's door." Vendi could not help but laugh. It seems that asking for your help was the right choice. Azima, who even dared to express her dissatisfaction in front of Tilly, was rendered speechless by you. No wonder you're the shadow killer who once shocked King City. I said it according to your plan. Nightingale twitched the corner of her mouth. "At most, My tone was a little harsh. The essence is your tone. Vendi sighed. Even I felt nervous for her at that time. She wasn't acting when she said, enough. If it were me, I would have made the same choice. Wait, why do I feel that it's not a compliment? Nightingale muttered. It's a compliment. Of course it's a compliment. Take the chaos drinks as proof. Vendi smiled and took her hand. Tonight, let's exchange the $10 bills for drinks and have a good drink. What do you think? Okay, I believe you. After reading through Vendi's report, Roland finally felt relieved. Most of the Sleeping Island witches had accepted the recruitment, and a few small groups did not cause too much trouble. Everything was developing in the direction he expected. If everything went well, witches would soon appear in all fields of the production industry. People would be able to see these young and beautiful women active everywhere. It would be a unique scene in Neverwinter. More importantly, the addition of more than 70 new witches would bring a great leap to the industry of Neverwinter. He was looking forward to it. Just then, the phone on the table rang. The signal came from City Hall. He picked up the receiver and heard Barev's voice. Chapter 957. When Roland walked into the port surrounded by his guards, 2 three-masted ships with black and white dragon flags were unloading cargo. The officials in the city hall stood in a circle around the stacked wooden boxes and exclaimed from time to time. Long time no see, Your Majesty. Marjorie quickly came forward and bowed to him with a smile. Please forgive me for only being able to meet you like this. It's not suitable for me to wear a long dress on the sea. I hope you don't mind. A man beside her also put his hand on his chest and saluted. Your Majesty, Sandy Asuka from Twin Dragon Island pays his respects to you. I wonder if you're satisfied with my attire? After that, he blinked and said, it should be very compatible with the phrase, soaring seabird, right? In fact, Roland had already noticed his conspicuous appearance before he even opened his mouth. Speaking of which, it was hard not to notice a humanoid figure with feathers all over his body. His attire was that of an ordinary fjords merchant, but from the headscarf wrapped around his head to the soft leather shoes on his feet, he could see the tassels made of bird feathers everywhere. However, after a long voyage, many of the feathers had become bare poles, and even the decorations still hanging on his clothes had lost their original luster, which made him think of the phrase, drenched chicken. No. You misunderstood, Roland said while holding his forehead. In his mind, Sandy Asuka was just a very ordinary blue icon. Any man of the same age as him, as well as a few men of the opposite sex, had the experience of eagerly clicking on it. Although you don't want lightning to recognize you, I bet that if you enter the castle with this appearance, you'll definitely be stared at by her inseparable companion, Maggie, Mr. Thunder. In that case, even if you stick a fake beard on your face, I'm afraid it'll be difficult to cover up. Haha, really? Thunder laughed heartily. What a pity, I'm quite satisfied with this attire. You may not know, but since I asked a tailor to make this set, it has become popular on several islands. Was this the power of an example? Roland silently rolled his eyes. Besides, the man was indeed the most outstanding explorer in the fjords. He was almost 40 years old, yet he could still maintain such a youthful attitude. If it was someone else, they probably wouldn't go through so much trouble for a name that was made up at the last minute. Everything started from the letter before the expedition. After the installation of the steel ship was completed, the next step was the trial sailing phase. Roland, on the other hand, had always kept a respectful distance from the unpredictable sea. At the same time, he was well aware of the level of the first iron ship he had designed. There was no doubt that even though a lot of equipment and functional areas had been reduced, it was still a long way from being a complete product in the true sense. Not a pile of iron that could float and move back and forth could be considered a qualified seagoing ship. Due to the turbulence of the waves, the working environment of the machinery of the ship was completely different from that of a riverboat. In addition, it was the first time that the steam turbine was used, so the reliability of the entire power system was still a question mark. It was not surprising that the ship would break down after leaving the port. What was more troublesome was that he had no idea about the maneuverability of the ship or the interaction between humans and machines. If he encountered any difficulties in mechanical principles, he could go to the dream world to find a solution. But as for how to operate a ship, before the popularization of electronic auxiliary systems, he was afraid that only one type of ship would be able to provide the answer. There was no other way but to explore it himself. Therefore, inviting Thunder to test the ship was the best choice he could think of. Roland was not only an experienced navigator but also the leader of an expedition team. There were as many as 100 excellent sailors under his command, so his feedback would definitely be more valuable. Roland planned to take this opportunity to test and adjust the ship while recording all the data during the long voyage. In this way, when the next ship starts construction, there will undoubtedly be a huge leap forward. And this data would also be a valuable asset to the manufacturing industry in Neverwinter. Because this part might take 2 to 3 months, it was necessary for Thunder to stay in Neverwinter for a while. In order not to expose his identity, Roland casually made up a fake identity for him in the letter, which was Sandy Asuka. Unexpectedly, not only did Roland gladly accept it, but he also added a bunch of settings to this identity. His acting spirit really made the King of Grey Castle gasp in amazement. "By the way, Your Majesty, did you really finish the construction of the steamship so quickly?" Thunder changed the topic. In the fjords, even the best craftsmen and the most suitable materials would need several years. This is already considered slow. After all, steel is much easier to process than wood. You don't need to spend time soaking it for preservation, nor do you need to wait for it to dry in the shade. You just need to get the right temperature. Roland shrugged. "It's now in the dock of the harbor. If you're interested, we can go and have a look now." "That's exactly what I want." Thunder's eyes immediately lit up. "I've been thinking about it since we were on the sea. But what about those golden dragons?" Roland pointed at the wooden boxes that were being carried off the ship one after another. City Hall seemed to be counting the number of coins in the boxes. "As I said before, this ship is priced at cost." "Of course, we dare not refuse your kindness," Marjorie replied. "Those are the proceeds from the sale of the perfume and chaos drinks." "So much?" He was a little surprised. "It's not the delivery date stipulated in the contract, is it? Because it's on the way, and it can also reduce the burden of the next delivery." Marjorie covered her mouth and laughed. "Besides, you guessed right, Your Majesty. These two products are very popular in the fjords, especially the chaos drinks. They're selling like crazy. The best-tasting variety can be sold at 10 times the original price after a few exchanges, and some people are willing to collect the slightly inferior variety. In short, the chaos drinks have become a symbol of strength in the banquets of the major chambers of commerce." Roland could not help but raise his eyebrows. It seemed that it was really a good choice to let a professional reseller do this business. "Your Majesty, there's a magic reaction in the crowd." Suddenly, he heard nightingales whisper, "Is there a witch in their team?" Only then did he notice that not far behind Marjorie, a woman seemed to be looking in their direction. Most of her body was hidden behind a maid, and only half of her head was exposed. When their eyes met, she quickly shrank her head back and panicked like a frightened rabbit. Roland vaguely remembered that the female merchant had mentioned this in her previous letter. "Is that person your former witch friend?" Chapter 958. She can go ashore now. Roland said with great interest. "I remember you once said that after she chose to live in the sea, she had no contact with human beings for a long time." "Thanks to the help of Her Highness Tilly and Lady Camilla," Marjorie replied with a sigh. "Without the ability to communicate directly through consciousness, I'm afraid she wouldn't have been able to adapt to a normal life. Besides, Joan has completely forgotten how to speak. Lord Thunder has found several scholars for her, but they haven't been very effective. Now she can only speak a few words and can't even have a complete conversation." Speaking of this, Karina paused for a moment as if she wanted to say something. "What's wrong?" Roland could not help asking. "I don't know if it's because of the long period of transformation, but some parts of her body have become different from a human's." Margaret bit her lip. According to my understanding of witches, when they don't use their magic, they should be no different from ordinary people. But Joan can't completely return to her previous appearance. Her cheeks, neck, arms, and legs are covered with blue scales, just like those sea ghosts. Roland immediately thought of Lorger's long ears. Well, the scaly skin seems to have a unique charm. Ahem, no, now is not the time to think about this. Even Princess Lorger of the Wild Flame clan's harmless ears are feared by the Sand Nation, so Joan's situation can only be worse. Did someone maliciously hurt her? We tried our best to prevent it, but it's inevitable that someone will spread the news. Marjorie sighed. If we want to teach her to adapt to human life, we can't avoid contact with others. Thunder's voice was also quite helpless. Even in the fjords, there are only a few people who can accept her appearance. Since she came to the mansion, 3 maids and 2 scholars have been scared away. There are even rumors that I raised a sea ghost in the mansion. Maybe the sea is more suitable for her. If my friend hated life on land, I wouldn't force her to stay on the island, Karina said. But from the process of Joan's contact with other people, I can see that she doesn't hate this change. Although she still spends several hours in the sea every week, she is happy to get along with the maids who accept her. Besides, compared to raw fish, she now prefers to eat roasted fish. However, this kind of environment was only limited to Thunder's mansion. Roland understood what Karina meant, but he could not think of a good solution at the moment. It was a long process to change people's minds, especially for Joan. In fact, her problems were even more serious than those of ordinary witches. For a long time in history, witches with beastification, deformities, or inhuman appearances had been the target of discrimination and exclusion. She'll get better, he could only comfort her. Can I see her up close? If the problem was really serious, he had to make do with it first. For example, like Lorger's ears, she would basically look like a normal person after wearing a hat. Of course, said Margaret, waving her hand in Joan's direction. Come here, my dear. But Joan just poked her head out to take a look and then hid it again. Your Majesty, I'm sorry. She may not be used to so many people. Marjorie bowed embarrassedly. It seems that you scared her, Nightingale said gloatingly. Roland glared at the empty space beside him and coughed twice. It's okay. She'll be in Neverwinter for a while anyway. She'll get used to it. Let's go to the dock first. In order to build the steel ship, Roland deliberately marked out an area of nearly 100 acres in the southwest corner of the shallow beach. He asked Lotus to raise earth walls around it to form a barrier to block people's sight. Not only were there sentry posts at the 4 corners, but the First Army was also stationed on the walls. Therefore, except for the workers involved in the construction, not many people knew what the ship looked like. When they passed through the earth walls and walked down the Z-shaped stairs to the bottom of the dock, there was a burst of irrepressible exclamations. Everyone's attention was drawn to the gigantic object in front of them. It was definitely not an exaggeration. When admiring the ship from below, the first thing they saw was the towering hull. Different from the round 3-masted sailboat, the freeboard of the ship was almost perpendicular to the ground and the belly was extremely flat. There was no keel protruding from the hull at all. With the limited view, they felt as if they were standing under a towering steel wall. One could imagine the pressure. 3 gods. I'm not dreaming, am I? How heavy can it be? I'm afraid it's more than 20,000 tons. Even the largest 3-masted sailboat probably can't withstand a collision from it. Not to mention a sailboat, I think the deep-sea giant beast will be scared away at the sight of it. Thunder. No, Lord Flying Bird, you didn't say that we were going to manipulate such a monster. The team immediately lost its order. The sailors ran to the side of the ship and started to touch and knock on the hull of the ship. Their excitement was evident on their faces. They were all the most experienced ship operators in the fjords. Even if they had not seen such a ship before, they could still recognize its extraordinary features. At this moment, Thunder was no less shocked than the others. In fact, he was even more shocked. This was because Roland had mentioned in his letter that the ship from top to bottom was made of steel. At that time, he thought it was an exaggeration. After all, even a conventional wooden ship would only use the best wood for the key parts. Therefore, when he was recruiting his men, he only described the ship as an ocean-going ship without sails with a steel frame that could withstand the huge waves of the sea. But the facts in front of him told him that it was not so. Although he knew that Neverwinter was quite good at shipbuilding, he did not expect it to be so exaggerated. Not to mention how to splice the hard steel together, just the raw materials used to make it was something that the fjord's islands couldn't even hope to match. How valuable was steel? Among all kinds of goods, iron ore was not a luxury. A palm-sized ingot of pig iron could be sold for about 30 to 40 silver royals. But if it was forged into steel, the price would increase by 10 to 10 times, so the knight often regarded their armor as a family heirloom and passed it down from generation to generation. More importantly, the process was extremely time-consuming. A blacksmith could only forge 7 or 8 sets of qualified steel armor in his lifetime. In other words, even if all the blacksmiths in the fjords were gathered together and spent decades, it was impossible to gather so much steel. At first, he ordered a steam paddle steamer from Roland. According to the fjord's Chamber of Commerce, the price was about 3,000 to 4,000 golden dragon royals. Therefore, when Roland told him that he would only charge the cost of the ship, he did not care too much, because the value of a new route alone was far more than the cost of the ship itself. Since the king of Grey Castle wanted to share information, he could not say that he was taking advantage of Roland. He even planned to pay all the cost of the ship to Roland after the exploration of the sea, not for anything else but as a reward for taking care of his daughter. He only hoped that Lightning could live a better life in Neverwinter in the future. But now, Thunder could not help but suspect that even if he only counted the cost of the materials, the price of the ship would probably be astonishing. Chapter 959. When Thunder raised the question in his mind, Roland could not help but smile. Roland had to admit that the explorer was really good at seeing the essence of the problem. According to the standards of the manual era, any industrial product could be regarded as sky-high, but he certainly would not charge the blacksmith according to the forging cost, otherwise it would be too hurtful. In fact, if Neverwinter had not built a large number of steel-making facilities after the success of the converter experiment, it would have been impossible to carry out the 2 major projects of steel ships and rail trains in a short period of time. Without the witches, the steel mill had now entered a stage of positive development. The whole process, from extracting iron from the high furnace area to extracting charcoal from the coking tower, to refining the molten steel into ingots, had been simplified. In such a large plant, apart from all kinds of workers, the rest were auxiliary machinery driven by steam engines. The rolling water vapor often mixed with the floating dust, forming the unique environment of the North Slope Mountain, gray fog. If one stood at a high place in the city and looked toward the impassable mountain range, they would see a gray cloud that covered the mountainside. When the steel mill was operating at full capacity, the daily output of steel was more than the annual output of a city in the past. This was also the foundation of all industrial projects in Neverwinter. Based on this foundation, everything would undergo a qualitative change, but few people could truly understand the meaning behind it. We can talk about the price later, but I guarantee that it will be much lower than the lowest price you can imagine. Roland smiled slightly. Because that's not the point. As I said, the development of new waters is of great significance to all human beings. As the king of Grey Castle, I'm naturally willing to contribute to this. Thunder was moved. I admire your foresight. Few people are willing to spend money on things they can't see. Even in the fjords, the Chamber of Commerce prefers new routes that can bring profits. Although you can't take the risk yourself, this idea has already surpassed many explorers. Do you think that what I said in the Old King's City was just for show? Roland thought indifferently. In terms of the desire to understand this world, I'm afraid no one can compare to me. After all, it may be related to the origin of the Battle of Divine Will and the secrets hidden behind the curtain. Compared to that, let's take a look on the ship first. He smiled and changed the topic. Since you're here, I'll show you around from start to finish. That couldn't be better, Your Majesty. Thunder replied with a grin. Since there was no ready-made information available for reference, the steel ship could be said to be a collection of classic ship types, but it could also be said to be neither fish nor fowl. The front half of the ship was similar to an ironclad. The bow was slanted outwards, and there was a ram below the waterline. The middle section was rapidly widened to achieve as much stability as possible in high sea conditions. The stern was flat, similar to a modern ship, with a total tonnage of about 2,500 tons. Roland had tried to add some advanced technologies to improve the ship's performance, such as a bulbous bow and fin stabilizers. However, the former needed to be designed according to the ship's shape and speed, while the latter required a complex mechanical linkage structure to adjust the angle. Considering factors such as the time limit and reliability, he finally gave up on these options that were far ahead of the times. However, this did not mean that it was an enlarged version of the shallow water gunboat Roland. Its power core, a steam turbine personally assembled by Anna, was already something that Thunder and the others could not understand. Apart from this, handheld telephones were used for the first time in cabin communication. Several lines connected the command post, the engine room, and the watchtower together. Compared to the sound transmission tube, which was sometimes good and sometimes bad, no matter how noisy the sea was, the captain could still clearly hear the reports of the various units. It was also worth mentioning that these hand-operated telephones were equipped with the enchanted mini-dawn power supply, which was enough to support a long exploration. This is incredible. After touring the entire ship, Thunder stood in the bright and clean tower bridge and exclaimed, "I even feel that she's not a ship, but a mobile sea fortress." Roland chuckled to himself. "How is it? I didn't let you down, did I?" "No, Your Majesty, you think too highly of me." The explorer did not hide his satisfaction. "She's the most beautiful ship I've ever seen in my life. She's exceeded my expectations in every aspect. Now I feel that as long as I have her, it won't be a problem to cross the entire swirling sea." "Don't jump to conclusions yet," he waved his hand. "To be honest, I don't know anything about shipbuilding, so it can only be regarded as a complicated machine, not a real ship. As for how good it can be, we'll have to wait for the next sea trials. You'll need to provide data such as speed, stability, number of sailors, food storage, and so on. If all goes well, you'll be able to set off for the shadow waters after this year's months of demons." "Nothing at all." Thunder clicked his tongue. "If those old craftsmen in the fjords know what you said, they'll definitely jump into the sea with hatred. By the way, if you can build such an amazing steel ship even though you know nothing about shipbuilding, then what will the things you know be like? You'll find out tomorrow." Roland kept Roland guessing. "But before that, you'd better enjoy tonight's welcome banquet." After nightfall, the castle hall was brightly lit. The candles were replaced by glowing stones that emitted a soft and stable light. The old wooden tables were replaced by round tables covered with white cloths. Champagne towers were formed by wine glasses, and the musicians were playing violins. Since the city hall's treasury was filled up, not only had the castle been renovated, but even the banquet was becoming more and more like the style of King City. Most of the people invited were the higher-ups of Neverwinter and the Witch Union. Of course, the Witch Union was no exception. "The man standing beside His Majesty is the explorer from your hometown?" Lorger looked at him with interest and turned to Lightning. "Don't you want to talk to him? His name is Sandy Asuka, right?" The little girl shrugged and put a piece of roasted mushroom into the mouth of the pigeon on her head. "I've never heard of him. He must be a nobody. There's nothing to talk about. You don't know that there are countless explorers in the fjords, but most of them are captains who have only traveled on remote routes once or twice. They haven't even seen hurricanes and big waves." She paused. "By the way, why hasn't Mystery Moon come yet? Didn't he say he was going to challenge our exploration group? But someone who can be received by the Great Chief shouldn't be an ordinary person. For example, me." Lorger wagged her tail. "Maybe he's heard about your father?" After joining the Neverwinter exploration group for a while, she had learned more about the past of her two companions. "I agree," Maggie echoed. "It's never wrong to ask who." Chapter 960. Although she said that she would listen to her companion's good intentions, the little girl did not hold much hope in her heart. His Majesty also knew about this. If she had heard any news about her father, His Majesty would have called her over. Since she had not, she probably knew nothing about it. Well, I'll just show her to the two people who care about me. Walking up to the explorer, Lightning could not help but frown. Isn't this person too pompous? She thought. Judging from his age, this visitor from the fjords, who called himself Sandy Asuka, was only about 30 years old. He wore an eye patch over his right eye, which was embroidered with a bright rose. The branches and green leaves below the flower were tattooed on his face, almost covering half of his cheeks. It made people wonder about his taste. Although a good explorer should not judge a book by its cover, his words and actions were not any better. During the conversation, Sandy Asuka seemed to be telling them about a difficult adventure. His exaggerated words almost made Lightning think that he was passing through the end of the sea or the edge of hell. In fact, the scene he described was just the burning fire archipelago. Of course, it was indeed full of danger. Lava often spewed from the bottom of the sea, forming huge columns of steam clouds. Not only could it obstruct vision, but the scalding water droplets were also a fatal threat to the crew. However, after several generations of exploration, there was a complete sea map of the area. As long as one chose the right route and time to enter according to the sea map, one could basically avoid danger. When she was less than 10 years old, she had already set foot on the main island of the burning fire archipelago with her father. For people from the fjords, only those who had discovered new routes, islands, or relics could be called explorers. However, there were at least thousands of islands in the swirling sea. This inevitably led to a situation where the level of explorers was worlds apart. In Lightning's eyes, there were only a few people who could be compared to her father. Obviously, Sandy Asuka was not one of them. For a moment, she was even less interested in greeting him. Just as she was hesitating, someone suddenly took her hand. She looked up and found that it was Aunt Marjorie. "Young man, you came just in time." The female merchant smiled warmly. "Let me introduce you to Mr. Sandy, the explorer from Twin Dragon Island and the chief of the Dragonhead Chamber of Commerce. He was also one of your father's admirers." His name has already been mentioned before, Lightning thought to herself. But since Aunt Marjorie had started the conversation, she had no choice but to put on a smile and say, "Hello, I'm Lightning, also from the fjords, although I wasn't born on the fjords islands." "Ah, you're Lord Thunder's daughter?" Sandy said happily. "I've heard from Lady Marjorie that the daughter of the greatest explorer is now in Grey Castle. I've finally met her in person. He does look a little like Lord Thunder." She was lying. Her father had clearly said that she looked more like her mother, whom she had never met. The corner of Lightning's mouth twitched. "Thank you. Do you have any news about him?" "I've only heard some rumors. Some say that he drifted to an unknown island, while others say that he has actually returned to the fjords. But because of the incredible adventure he encountered after the shipwreck, he didn't tell anyone about it. Instead, he's quietly preparing for a new expedition. As for other theories, especially those malicious rumors, they're not worth mentioning at all." Sandy went on. "Of course, I personally prefer the second one. After all, there were several reef islands around the storm. For Lord Thunder, it wasn't an insurmountable danger. In fact, many people in his fleet survived." This judgment was close to what she had guessed, and Roland's appearance was a little more pleasing to the eye. As for whether her father had found her or not, it did not matter. As long as she followed the path of an explorer, she believed that she would meet him again one day. "By the way, may I ask, which island did you find?" "Ah." A flash of embarrassment flashed across Sandy's face. "In front of His Majesty, I'll tell you the truth. It can be said that it's thanks to your father that I can become an explorer. Since the discovery of the Shadow Islands, it has become a land of exploration for many people, including the Chamber of Commerce. My fleet wanted to deliver a batch of supplies to the transfer island, but we were attacked by sea monsters on the way and deviated from the route. I didn't expect that we would arrive at an island that wasn't marked on the sea map." Well, the last point was confirmed. He was really the kind of lucky person who had only traveled a few remote routes but was exceptionally lucky. I see. This is also one of the charms of exploration, isn't it? Lightning replied, pretending to be serious. Then I won't disturb your conversation with His Majesty. Then she turned to Roland and made a noble salute. Your Majesty, please allow me to take my leave. Roland seemed to be a little distracted. After a while, he came to his senses and said, Go ahead. Although His Majesty's expression was a little strange, thinking that he had Nightingale by his side to protect him, Lightning did not take it to heart. After all, she was about to face the first challenge since the establishment of the exploration group. No matter what, she could not lose. Seeing the little girl skipping away, Roland could not help but be stunned. Thunder was simply a drama queen. After a series of performances, the other party actually did not have any doubts. No, if he did not know for sure that the person in front of him was Thunder, it would be difficult for him to associate the current, Sandy Asuka, with the person who got off the ship. According to his original idea, the welcome banquet was to arrange a reasonable identity for Thunder. The banquet could be divided into two halls, one large and one small, with the small hall for the distinguished guests. This was also a common practice for banquets. Unexpectedly, Thunder thought that there was no need to go through so much trouble and that all of them could be gathered together. Roland did not care. After all, the person who did not want his daughter to recognize him was Thunder. However, when he arrived, he found that Thunder had completely changed. After taking off the feather suit, Thunder had completely changed his appearance. According to Thunder, he had covered his face with a layer of gelatinous substance and supplemented it with pearl powder to achieve the effect of changing his face. Those exaggerated tattoos and eye masks were also decorations, which could distract people's attention and thus weaken the difference between the gelatinous substance and real skin. As for controlling his voice, it was a skill that Thunder had mastered during the exploration. However, in Roland's view, this was not the point. He believed that everyone had their own characteristics, and the person that Thunder wanted to deceive was his daughter who had been with him for more than 10 years. Even if his voice and smile had changed, he could still be recognized. Then, when Thunder began his performance, Roland found that there was really such a talented person. The explorer in his late 40s had disappeared without a trace, and in his place was a rather pompous, boastful young leader of the Dragonhead Chamber of Commerce. Chapter 961. Thank you. When only Marjorie and Nightingale were left, Thunder put away his fake smile and sincerely said to Roland, Seeing her now, I feel that I made the right choice. I'll leave the rest of my life to you. She's grown up. Marjorie also sighed. The serious tone of an adult just now made me want to hold her in my arms and love her. Hey, you've spoken your mind, haven't you? Roland thought. But she hasn't given up on the road of adventure. Even here, Lightning has formed her own exploration team. Although there are only 3 members. Unless you lock her up, she'll catch up with you one day. If she can't avoid it, that's her fate. Thunder smiled bitterly. But at least not now. Before that day comes, I hope she can get through this peacefully. However, the battle of divine will was close at hand. Even if they were far away from the sea, they might not be safe. This was especially true for Neverwinter, which was the bridgehead. Once it fell, the survival of mankind would be in vain. However, Roland did not say this out loud. Revealing the divine will was the most magnificent adventure for Lightning. She would never give up halfway. Since he could not make her quit, saying it out loud would only make her worry. Don't worry, I'll take good care of her, Roland said slowly as he patted Thunder on the shoulder. What did he say? Lorgar put Maggie back on Lightning's head. Did you find out where your father is? The little girl shook her head. Just as I expected, there's no news. But don't worry, this kind of thing is more interesting if you do it yourself, with the strength of our exploration team. Maggie flapped her wings. By the way, did Mystery Moon come? I didn't see her. What? Lightning curled her lips. She looked so confident before, but now she doesn't even dare to show up? By the way, What exactly does she want to challenge us with? Lorgar asked curiously. I don't know, Ku. What? Since it's a challenge, no matter what the content of the competition is, the exploration group will not refuse anyone, Lightning said proudly. That's right, Ku. Maggie nodded in agreement. Ah. The Wild Flame Princess held her forehead helplessly. Just what kind of organization had she joined? Sorry, I'm late. Just then Mystery Moon's voice came from behind them. Lorgar turned around and saw Mystery Moon trotting over, holding Lily's hand, followed by Summer and Sharon. I thought you wouldn't dare to come after boasting, Lightning said, crossing her arms. How could that be? Riddle shouted. It's just that it took some time to investigate the matter. This is also a necessary measure to ensure that the challenge can proceed smoothly. All right, she shrugged indifferently, then you can tell me what the competition is about now. Of course, but before that, I want to introduce my team. Mystery Moon opened her arms and pushed the other 3 witches in front of Lightning. From today on, the Neverwinter Detective Group is officially established. These are my new members. Detective Group? What's that, Ku? No, I'm not. Upon hearing this, the witches all had different expressions. Lorgar, Maggie, and the others were confused, while Summer and Sharon were confused. Lily even yelled angrily. His Majesty said it. Mystery Moon hurriedly explained, Sister Vendi told me that His Majesty knew that we went to the school district to look for the mystery of the arson case. Then he mentioned this title, which probably means investigating the unknown and seeking the truth. Not only that, but he also gave me a special title. Really? Lightning expressed her doubt. If you don't believe me, you can ask Sister Vendi. It seems to be called the Tumble Washing Machine. Mystery Moon scratched the back of her head. But she doesn't know what it means. Seeking the truth of the crime. Sharon pondered for a moment. If it can help the security of Neverwinter, then I'm willing to join. Can I also? Summer pointed to herself. Miss Nightingale said that I'm already a member of the Security Bureau. No problem. Mystery Moon gave a thumbs up. Doesn't Lightning often take on reconnaissance tasks for the First Army? As long as we complete His Majesty's order first. Sorry, please don't include me, Lily said, rolling her eyes. There are many samples in the lab waiting for me to record, and the mushroom plantation needs to be doubled. I really don't have time for your nonsense. It's useless even if you call me a traitor this time. Traitor? Wait, I was wrong. Please listen to me first, Mystery Moon begged. I'm not fooling around this time. You should all know that His Majesty received a group of guests from the fjords, right? Nonsense, Lily said impatiently. Who do you think this welcome dinner is for? But there's a witch among them. That's the point. She continued. At that time, I happened to be checking the lights at the port. You mean wandering aimlessly? They don't even turn on the lights during the day. Then I noticed the witch. Mystery Moon tried hard to ignore Lily's sarcasm. I heard that these fjords people would stay in Neverwinter for several months. I thought that witch would naturally be one of them, so I decided to compete with her. Lightning's interest was aroused. Compete in what? Compete to see who can get her to join the team first. Mystery Moon said solemnly. There are 4 members in the detective group and it's the largest group in the Witch Union. But considering that your group was established earlier, it's considered a draw. The winner of this competition will decide which team is the strongest. Lorgar almost bit her tongue. So the challenge is to see who can get a witch first. Even if it doesn't have to be as serious as a holy duel, it can't be so reckless. To her surprise, both Lightning and Maggie looked serious, especially Maggie. Her raised tail indicated that she had entered the battle preparation state. Is it too late to back out now? Princess Lorgar felt like crying. Although I don't think the number of people can measure the strength of a team, we accept this challenge. Lightning said, patting her chest. Coo. Don't think it's easy. Mystery Moon held out a finger and shook it. First of all, the witch named Joan can hardly speak, so it's difficult for her to communicate with people. Second, she's extremely wary and afraid of strangers, just like us when we were being hunted by the church. So this competition will be a long process. As for the standard, let's see which team she's more willing to work with. What do you think? I have no objection. Lightning nodded. Wait. I have a question. Lorgar tried to make a final resistance. If I heard correctly, even if she'll stay here for a few months, she'll leave sooner or later. So whether she chooses to join the detective group or the exploration group, isn't it meaningless? Of course not, Mystery Moon said seriously. If we can help her walk out of the shadow of the past and become cheerful again, then everything we've done will not be in vain. Perhaps it's nothing for ordinary people, but for her, it'll be a ray of light that shines into the darkness. And this is what His Majesty has been doing since the beginning. In an instant, Lorgar felt her heart skip a beat. Perhaps these people were not as childish as she had imagined. Wait, where did you learn about this? Lily suddenly frowned. Mystery Moon suddenly froze. Could it be? She looked at Mystery Moon and then at Summer, and her face suddenly changed. You asked Summer to use the backtracking ability to eavesdrop on His Majesty's conversation? No. Mystery Moon hurriedly explained. We just restored the scene of the harbor, and those words were said by His Majesty in front of everyone. There's absolutely no confidential content. At this point, she glanced at Lightning uncomfortably and said, I promise in the name of the electromagnetic force. You've gone too far this time. I'm going to tell Sister Vendy. Betray? No, I swear there won't be a second time. I don't believe it. It's true. You lie to me every time. If I lie to you again, I won't have any chaos drinks to drink. Don't go. Just as the detective group was in chaos, Maggie suddenly soared into the air and flew toward a corner of the hall. Except for Lightning, only Lorgar noticed this scene. She saw the pigeon fly across the hall, land in front of a round table, pick up a piece of roast meat, and then jump onto the shoulder of a woman. The latter seemed to be a little panicked at first, but was soon attracted by the pigeon. Not only that, but she also accepted the roast meat from the pigeon. The wolf girl pricked up her ears and aimed at Maggie. After a while, she heard the conversation between the two. But it was undoubtedly a kind of conversation that was difficult to understand. Coo. Yeah. Coo. Yeah. Half a quarter of an hour later, Maggie soared into the air and returned to Lightning's head. Chapter 962. What's going on over there? During the conversation, Marjorie suddenly showed a hint of surprise. What's Joan doing? Roland also noticed the small commotion on one side of the hall. He saw the female merchant's witch friend leave the corner and slowly walk towards Lightning and the others accompanied by her maid. Maggie, on the other hand, was walking back and forth between the two as if she was delivering a message. At first, Joan was very nervous. She almost only stayed behind the maid and would only stick out half of her body when the pigeon approached. But when the two sides met, the situation quickly changed. Not only did she talk to the witches, but she even stretched out her hands and carefully touched Lorgar's ears and tail. I see. Roland could not help laughing. Lightning lives up to her name. This is incredible. Marjorie covered her mouth and said, Do you know how long it took us to get Joan out of the water? It took a full 2 months, and with the help of Lady Camilla. How on earth did she do it? Thunder was also quite surprised. She didn't need to do anything. She just needed to take Maggie and Lorgar with her. Roland laughed. Joan's psychological defense comes from people's rejection of aliens. But when she's surrounded by aliens, she naturally doesn't need to maintain this kind of defense. Whether it's the pigeon or the wolf girl, I'm afraid they're all the same in her eyes. The same kind? Marjorie repeated. Well, it's not the first time you've seen Maggie, and Lorgar is more similar to Joan. Roland explained the beastified characteristics of the third princess of the Wild Flame clan. Anyway, you don't have to worry about whether she can blend in with the others in the next few months. That witch called Lorgar. Has she never been ostracized by anyone? If she hadn't, she wouldn't have come to Neverwinter. Even in the southernmost region, where witches are regarded as the goddesses of the clans, an obviously different appearance is still considered a bad sign. Roland shook his head. Of course, this kind of conflict also exists in Neverwinter, but it's not so obvious. As for the Witch Union, there's no rejection at all. We're all survivors who have climbed up from the bottom, so we're the clearest about the nature of our abilities. If there's a new sister, they'll be more than happy to welcome her. The unknown is the greatest fear. Thunder sighed. At first, I wanted to become an explorer because I wanted to make a lot of money. But now, I just hope that I can take a few more steps in my lifetime. There are too many mysteries in this world that need to be solved. If we don't go out, people can only curl up in a small piece of land and be bound by fear for the rest of their lives. That's why I decided to support you, Roland said, raising his glass to him. There's an old saying where I come from: people will always become as big as their own thoughts. If you can think like this, you are destined to be remembered by history. Thank you for your praise. Thunder clinked his glass and smiled. I'll do my best on this trip and live up to your expectations. Marjorie gazed at Joan for a long time as if she was thinking about something. After a while, she turned to Roland and said, Your Majesty, I have a presumptuous request. Go ahead. After this expedition, I originally wanted Joan to go back to the fjords and settle down in her birthplace, she said softly. Life on the sea is too lonely, and I don't want her to live alone anymore. But now I've changed my mind. Marjorie paused. Your Majesty, can I entrust her to you? You mean, leave her in Neverwinter? If it were in the fjords, I'm afraid that Joan would only be able to move around in a small area and talk to very few people. But here, at least, she can make real friends. The female merchant nodded. After all, I'm the one who took her away from the familiar sea, so I can't betray her trust. Now, I think there's no better place than here. Of course, no problem. Roland smiled. The Witch Union was established for this purpose. I'm relieved to hear that, Margaret said as she lifted her skirt and saluted with relief. Lily yawned and went back to her bedroom. She hung the wet towel on the hanger and was about to read a biology book before going to bed. Suddenly, she heard Mystery Moon's whisper behind her. We lost, we lost, we lost. She rolled her eyes and pretended that she had not heard anything. She opened the book indifferently. As expected, Mystery Moon's voice immediately became much louder. The detective group lost. The detective group lost. The detective group lost. Are you done? Lily suddenly felt the veins on her forehead throbbing. She suddenly turned around and said, Go to sleep. But we lost. Mystery Moon hugged her pillow, her face full of unwillingness. Don't you feel heartache? I've thought about how to win her over, but it's all for naught. Looking at the way they communicate, they don't seem to understand each other at all. How did they do it? Did they know each other before? Now the exploration group has the same number of people as the detective group, and the title of the largest group is also. What did it mean by all for naught? It was obvious that she had lost before the other party had done anything. Why should I feel sad? Who's talking about us? Lily interrupted. I'll say it again. The detective group only had 3 people at the beginning. Now that we've lost the challenge and we have fewer people than the other party, it's a complete defeat. You'd better disband as soon as possible. After that, she snorted and turned her eyes back to the book. She decided that no matter how Mystery Moon interfered, she would not respond. But to her surprise, Mystery Moon did not continue to pester her. It was quiet behind her. Something was wrong. Lily felt a little uneasy. Did I go too far? Although Mystery Moon was a little annoying, she had good intentions. If she had not made such a scene, Joan would not have been able to get together with them. Apart from eavesdropping on His Majesty's conversation, she had not caused any other losses. Was she too harsh? Suddenly, a more serious thought leaped into her mind. Mystery Moon was different from her. She used to be very reserved, and because of her lack of ability, she had been scolded by Kara many times. In the Witch Cooperation Association, she was like an invisible person. Now that Mystery Moon had finally become cheerful and lively, Would she become depressed again because of her scolding? Thinking of this, Lily suddenly felt a little regretful. She swallowed and slowly turned around. Words of apology were already on the tip of her tongue. However, what she saw was a $10 note. She didn't know when the man had snuck up behind her, but he had both hands raised, respectfully holding the note in front of her. What are you doing? Lily was startled by Mystery Moon's action. Please don't leave the detective group. I'm willing to give you a bottle of chaos drink in exchange. Mystery Moon said with a sad face. If even you leave, the detective group will never have a chance to rise again. I told you I'm not a witch. Can't you listen to me? Lily helplessly put her hand on her forehead and felt a little relieved. Fortunately, Mystery Moon was not as weak as she had imagined. After a long silence, she reached out and took the $10 note from Mystery Moon. You agree? Mystery Moon was overjoyed. Lily knocked on the table. I have a lot of things to do. I don't have time to fool around with you. But I can give you a hint, and this note is the reward. In the future, if you don't take up my work time, I can also help you with some ideas for the detective group. At least it's much better than recruiting strange witches. What hint? You shouldn't have come to me if you want to expand the group. Not everyone in the Witch Union is as busy as Soroya. You can target those idlers. Lily suppressed the guilt in her heart and apologized to Mystery Moon. Think about it. Who else accompanied you to the school to look for clues about the arson last time? Well, do you mean Evelyn? She can't do it. Although she doesn't have much time to use her ability, she still needs to take care of a tavern. Not her. You mean Amy? Mystery Moon hesitated. But she's not a member of Grey Castle, and she has her own companions. Isn't that even better? Pulling her into the detective group is equivalent to pulling all the witches in the kingdom of Wolfheart over, Lily said while counting on her fingers. Except for Annie Hero and Broken Sword aren't too busy, and the latter has a fixed cooperation with you. As for where they come from, does it matter? Joan is a witch from the fjords. Why don't you worry about it? I know. Also, you can consider those combat witches who used to belong to the Bloodfang Association. They're usually very idle. As long as you ask, I think they won't refuse. In this way, the detective group will have several more witches than the exploration group, at least in terms of scale. But remember two things. First, don't cause trouble for His Majesty. Second, don't challenge the exploration group at will. Lily warned. I don't know why, but I always feel that you can't defeat them. Because you're biased. Mystery Moon pouted. Of course not. Anyway, that's all I want to say. Go to bed and don't disturb me anymore. She waved her hand. Oh. Mystery Moon took a step forward and then turned back. What's wrong? Lily found that after experiencing the ups and downs of her mood, she was much more patient. Well, just in case. It's better than regretting when something goes wrong. That 10 yuan note is the cost of recruiting you. Mystery Moon hesitated. Since you're not joining the detective group, can you return it to me? Suddenly, Lily heard the sound of glass shattering in her heart. Chapter 963. The next day, Neverwinter welcomed the fourth holiday after the beginning of autumn, which was also the first weekend in mid-autumn. Since there were no legends about the creation of a new era in this world, for most people, they had to be busy at all times to fill their stomachs. Ever since Roland announced the rule of having one day off every 7 days, the people had attributed this gratitude to him. Being able to have a complete day of rest without having their wages deducted, what else could they be picky about with such a benevolent and loving lord? Especially the refugees from other places, after experiencing the living environment in Neverwinter, all of them were determined to settle down here. Even the propaganda about demons in City Hall could not stop this momentum. Compared to hunger and poverty, even the threat of demons became less important. However, Barev's report showed that after the official promotion of the rest day system, the production of Neverwinter was not affected much. The main reason was that the rest day system was not compulsory, and many people chose to continue working to earn extra pay. On the other hand, the trade activities in the city had increased significantly. Every weekend, the square area was always overcrowded. Not only local businessmen, but also foreign businessmen would choose to set up stalls and sell on that day. The rest of the time, they would buy specialty products of the Western region and resell them to other places. A year ago, this kind of weekly flow of goods was unimaginable. But now, with the increasing number of cement ships, the pace of trade became faster and faster. In large inland cities like Redwater City, people could even eat fresh sea fish soaked in ice from the shallow port. In the past, the nobles and merchants there could only eat salted dried fish at most. Because of this, Roland decided to hold important lectures, demonstrations of achievements, and all kinds of award ceremonies on rest days. He wanted to use the habits of the masses to further promote the liveliness of commercial trade. As the saying goes, wool comes from the sheep's back. The extra pay could be completely recovered from the sales tax and consumption. It was a strategy that killed many birds with one stone. Today was no exception. The remaining warmth of summer had not dissipated, and there was a gentle breeze blowing in the cloudless blue sky. Obviously, it was a good weather for traveling. The streets were crowded with people. From the dock area of the inland river to the northern wall of the city, the figures of the subjects could be seen everywhere. The difference was that this time, they were not there to buy a few pounds of good meat from the convenience market, but to witness the king's new invention. It was the first trial run of an unprecedented means of transportation, the train. Jewelry merchant Victor was also one of them. After learning about the promotion in City Hall, he even left a big deal to his subordinates and boarded a cement boat from the old king's city to Neverwinter overnight. Victor was undoubtedly one of the people who had been strongly affected by the changes in the western region over the years. When this place was still a remote town, he had already visited the lord of this place. He did not have much of an impression of the person in charge. He only remembered that the person was a middle-aged nobleman with a bloated body, and he was complaining that it was his turn to manage this barren land. If he hadn't occasionally been able to get 1 or 2 high-quality raw gemstones from the other side, he estimated that he would have stopped at Longsong Stronghold. Even so, Victor visited the western region at most once a year. No matter when he came, this border town was almost the same as the previous year, dilapidated and decayed. But in the last 3 years, he came here more frequently, especially after Roland Wimbledon announced the construction of the city, and he basically came here once a month. The western region of Grey Castle seemed to have become another world. Here, a day was no longer a day, but a month was no longer a month, but a year. Otherwise, it was hard for him to explain the rapid changes in Neverwinter. Victor walked into a tavern facing the street, and the owner immediately greeted him with a smile. "I knew you'd come, so I specially reserved a seat on the 3rd floor by the window for you." He took out a silver royal and threw it to the owner. "Take me there." "Yes, please follow me." As a regular customer of this tavern, Victor naturally did not choose to squeeze with the civilians on the street. Although there were many people gathered on the 3rd floor, at least he had a much wider view. The people around him were already in a heated discussion about today's exhibition. "That narrow street is the road the train is going to take? It's too far from the central square and the residential area." "Street? Ignorant. That's called a rail system, which is used in the mining area." Then someone sneered. "Since it's not for people, of course it should be farther away from crowded places. Do you think the train is a carriage? Are you talking about the stuff laid in the mines of Silver City?" "Yes, it was originally produced here, so it needs to be used with a steam engine." Victor could not help but join in the fun. "I've seen a trailer pulled by a steam engine. Its advantage is that it doesn't care about the terrain. If it's on flat land, mules and horses can completely replace it. If that's the case, City Hall won't advertise it as a cross-era transportation tool, right? Maybe it's just a gimmick." Another person muttered, "Go away." Immediately there was a burst of uproar. "Is this your first time in Neverwinter?" His Majesty never boasted in this aspect. That person was not convinced and wanted to say something more. Suddenly there was a loud whistle in the distance. "Woo! It's coming, it's coming!" The room suddenly became noisy. Everyone leaned out of the window and stared unblinkingly at the side street of the castle district. Some of the prepared people even took out a telescope from their bosoms. Victor also looked toward the source of the sound. He saw a long black dragon slowly moving out from behind the blocked houses and gradually reflected in the eyes of the crowd. It was huge, and its head was like an iron barrel on wheels. The top of the barrel was spewing out gray smoke, which was no different from the steam engine. Next to the front of the train, there was a four-wheeled carriage. The carriage was pulled by two groups of horses, and it was moving at the same speed as the train. It looked like they were competing with each other. However, because the carriage was full of oars, it was very difficult for the horses to take a step, which could be seen from the coachman's constant whipping. If not for the iron wheel hub, the carriage would have been crushed. As the full appearance of the train gradually came into view, Victor could not help but feel goosebumps on his back. Behind the front of the train were many carriages. Each of them was almost as big as 4 or 5 carriages, and they were also full of oars. Judging from the weight, it was probably as big as a river sailboat. The problem was that it was pulling several carriages at the same time. People's exclamations could be heard continuously. 4. The fourth one. 5. There can't be more, right? Oh my God, there are 6. It's coming out, the 7th one. The monster-like front of the train dragged a total of 7 carriages at an extremely stable speed through the open space in front of the castle. Victor also had an answer to the question in his heart. A steam engine fixed at the entrance of the mine to pull mining carts in and out was completely different from a steam engine that could move autonomously. The latter meant that wherever the railway was built, a large amount of goods could be transported there. Weight was no longer the bottleneck of land transportation. On the contrary, compared to shipping, its transportation capacity was more powerful. If His Majesty wanted to, he could even empty a city in a short period of time. Victor, who was born in a merchant family, naturally knew the importance of transportation. It was not without reason that most cities were built near rivers. The emergence of such a means of transportation would bring infinite possibilities to the flow of resources. It was not an exaggeration to say that it would transcend time. He felt an indescribable throbbing in his heart, which was both satisfaction and loss. He felt that he was witnessing history, but at the same time he was abandoned by history. In other kingdoms, the lords were still indulging in sensual pleasures. They still traveled by horse and mule carts, and their roads were still paved with bricks and full of mud. But they were completely unaware of it and were used to it. A thought emerged in Victor's mind. Chapter 964. A few days after the train's public debut, Neverwinter was filled with a high spirit. Even sitting in the castle, Roland could feel the high spirits of the people. This was not his speculation but the real data in the City Hall's report. In the past 3 days, we've received 60% more applications than usual. Nearly half of them, or 725 people, are newcomers who have moved for less than 2 months. This means that the average time to submit the application has been shortened from 5 months to 3.5 months. Barav said excitedly, holding a report in his hands. After the demon's attack, there was a slight decrease in the data. Now, not only has the decrease been made up, but the number has also increased significantly. This means that the people don't have to worry about the demons anymore. Your Majesty, this exhibition is a great success. Ever since Roland brought the concept of statistics and comprehensive analysis to the management level, the number of numbers on the report of the City Hall's director had been increasing and becoming more and more specific. It was as if no conclusion could be reached without comparing 2 sets of data. Not only that, but he also created a number of analysis formulas, one of which was arrival fixed interval. According to Barav, it reflected the determination of the newcomers to Neverwinter. Due to the establishment of the identity card system, if a refugee wanted to become an official resident, he or she had to apply to the City Hall. The condition was that he or she had a skill or a fixed residence. In addition, the City Hall would also accept the recommendation of a resident who had passed the review and had lived in Neverwinter for a year without any bad records. For the newcomers, It was almost an instinct to wait and see. Moreover, the time it took for them to save up for the down payment was also different due to different jobs and salaries. Therefore, the average value was used. The shorter the interval, the more loyal they were to the king and the more confidence they had in the new king's city. Roland had a different view on this conclusion. He had never believed in the loyalty of strangers. It was reasonable to say that they were confident, but ultimately, the people were still most concerned about whether their future interests could be protected. Cozying up to someone powerful was always a good choice. Therefore, displaying one's strength at an appropriate time could greatly increase the cohesion of the people. The train is undoubtedly such a tool. Even if most people have no idea of its nature, it does not hinder the huge body, the roaring cylinders, and the oppressive feeling brought by the weight of hundreds of tons. When the train passed the crossing of the castle district with an indomitable spirit, even thunder was amazed. Unlike sea transportation, the resistance against gravity on the ground had always limited the upper limit of land transportation. The appearance of the train had obviously broken this rule. He even joked that he would move his whole family to Neverwinter when he was too old to go on adventures. After all, there were so many new things here, and settling down here was an adventure in itself. Even the most famous explorer of the fjords was so amazed, not to mention the ordinary people. If he didn't want to stay in such a promising place, where else could he go? In addition, the city hall has also received many invitations from merchants, including Redwater and Silver Light Chambers of Commerce. Barov continued, "They are eager to meet you. They probably want to find out more about the train." "Refuse all of them." Roland smiled. "The train is not a commodity at present. Even if I'm willing to sell it, the price is not something they can afford. But you can sell them some other goods, such as the first and second generation steam engines from the mine." Today's Neverwinter was no longer the poor border town of the past. Any chamber of commerce could be received by the lord. If there was no special relationship between them, it was enough for the director of the city hall to deal with them. "I see," Barov said, stroking his beard. "Since the people are in high spirits, can we carry out the new reserve soldier system?" Roland changed the topic. Barov nodded. "I think there should be no problem." "Your Majesty, do you really think we will fight to that point?" "Just in case. After all, this is a war that will determine the fate of mankind. Shouldn't we be more serious?" The new reserve soldier system was a task he gave to the general staff after he returned from the expedition. The main content of the system included popularizing military training and expanding the reserve soldier system. The former required that military training should be included in primary education to cultivate the most basic sense of discipline and combat knowledge. The latter aimed to organize the subjects to undergo various combat training in batches without affecting production. In other words, it was a disguised militia system. Since the new system was mandatory, it was obviously the best time to carry it out while the atmosphere was heated. Once the system was put into operation, the Grey Castle Army would become a self-healing organism. When the frontline soldiers were insufficient, they could be directly replenished from the rear. This way, it would not take 2 or 3 months to teach each batch of new soldiers from the beginning as in the past. As for the Second Army, which was originally the Reserve Army, Roland also planned to transfer it to Neverwinter. The Longsong area no longer needed to resist the invasion of Timothy and the Church. At the same time, after the previous operation, he felt it was necessary to establish a second army. He could not personally lead an army to the front after the outbreak of the Battle of Divine Will. "You can start preparing for a new round of army recruitment," Roland instructed. "After the end of the months of demons, I hope to see the number of soldiers in the official army surpass 10,000, and we can't fall behind on supporting resources. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Majesty," Barov agreed immediately. "Very good, you can go now." Wait. Roland suddenly frowned. "Is there anything else?" The director immediately stopped. At this moment, Roland's attention was completely attracted by Nightingale's words. "Sylvie sent news that the demons have made new moves. The devil beasts seem to have expanded their patrol area, and they seem to be building a new camp." Tell them to come back quickly, Roland whispered and then looked at Barov. Immediately summon the ministers of all departments to the castle for a meeting. There's trouble in the north. Soon, the castle's conference hall was full of people. It was the first time that Sylvie had participated in such a meeting, so she looked a little nervous. Fortunately, Lightning stepped forward in time and helped her tell the whole story. This was supposed to be a routine investigation that couldn't be more normal. Due to the existence of the flying devil beasts, for safety's sake, Roland forbade Lightning, Maggie, and Lorger to approach the Tequila ruins alone. However, the demon's movements could not be ignored. Therefore, every 3 days, Maggie would carry Sylvie to carry out a border investigation. This was also the problem caused by the Phantom Instrument's failure to accurately locate the demons, so they could only rely on the witch's ability to make up for it. Fortunately, the observation range of the Eye of Magic was far beyond the enemy's range of activity. Apart from the frequent movements, there were no other disadvantages. Basically, they only needed to observe from a safe distance. Chapter 965. What do you think? Roland looked at the surging light screen on the wall. To understand the demon's intentions, the Tequila survivors were undoubtedly the group of people who had the most say. Old tricks, Auxa snorted coldly. Since threats don't work, it's time to use force. I've said it before. Threatening and pressuring the demons while advancing step by step is a trick they're good at dealing with human lords. If it were a witch city, the demons would choose to annihilate all of them. But the last time you estimated the demons' advance would take about half a year. Ahem, this is based on the average construction time of a large camp. Maybe they're too impatient. Auxa's voice sounded a little awkward. The latter's voice sounded a little awkward. Besides, the battle situation is always changing. It's stupid to follow the map. I didn't ask you to let your guard down. Hey, this is a big joke. Of course, it's necessary to keep an eye on them, but the counterattack plan is arranged according to the time node. If the demons needed half a year to establish a foothold, he would be able to lay the railroad tracks on their faces. By then he would have armored trains and rail cannons at the same time. He didn't believe the demons would have the energy to set up an outpost. Auxa didn't hide it on purpose. I agreed with her before. The Union paid a heavy price to get the information about the timetable of the expansion of the Red Line. Even until the fall of the Holy City, the information was never wrong. Half a year is the limit for the demons. Agatha seemed to have noticed Roland's doubt and said, the Union paid a heavy price to get the information about the expansion of the Red Line. So you're saying that the demons have broken through this limit, so the timetable that was exchanged with blood is no longer useful? Edith spread out her hands. Of course, it's understandable that the ancient information from 400 years ago has lost its effectiveness. Roland could not help but feel his eyebrows twitch. If there were ordinary people present who dared to stand up to the blob monster, the Pearl of the Northern region was undoubtedly one of them. Considering that he was not really an ordinary person, Edith could even be said to be the only one. As expected, Auxa reacted. Mortal to you. Maybe the giant skeletons made the Red Line expand faster, or maybe the demons have other purposes. If it wasn't for attacking, the outpost could have been opened earlier. After all, the scale of the outpost depends on the supply of red mist. Therefore, there is no need for you to argue over this matter. As for what to do, it is up to His Majesty the King. Roland nodded to himself. No wonder he is the actual leader of the Tequila survivors, Roland thought. His speech not only resolved the possible dispute, but also took into consideration his feelings. Speaking is indeed an art. However, there was still a problem in reality. Whether the demons had other intentions or wanted to attack Neverwinter as soon as possible, this change had caused him to lose his surveillance of the ruins of the Holy City. In fact, Neverwinter did not have many countermeasures. If the Phantom Instrument did not make a mistake, he might be able to observe for a while to see what the demons were up to. But now he had to get rid of the obstacle in front of him as soon as possible. Tell the First Army to prepare for battle. Roland took a deep breath and turned to Iron Axe to order. Yes, Your Majesty. The Sand Nation always answered neatly. Bold choice, Alhia praised. Blindfolded when the war comes is tantamount to suicide. We have to know the enemy's movements at all times to be prepared. General Staff, come up with at least one plan before sunset tomorrow. He deliberately glanced at Edith and said, I want to see the detailed process of deduction. Your Majesty, Philin Schilt, the Dawn Knight who had officially retired, said with a troubled look, according to Miss Sylvie, the flying devil beasts have occupied that area. There is almost no way to ensure that the First Army won't be discovered during the march. Once we are exposed, I'm afraid we will be in a difficult situation. Roland was also aware of this, which was why he wanted to get the detailed deduction before setting off. As the designer of the whole army's weapons, he naturally knew that Philin's words were tactful enough. If the anti-aircraft machine guns could not be set up and aimed in advance, the effect would be greatly reduced. At the same time, unlike the defense of the city wall, the enemy could come from all directions, which increased the demand for the barrage by several levels. In addition, if the railway was not in place, the logistics would have to be carried out by foot. If the supply team was intercepted by the devil beasts, the loss would definitely not be small. The distance from Neverwinter to the suspected enemy outpost was about 400 kilometers. Excluding the part where they had to pass through the misty forest, it was still 170 to 180 kilometers, which was impossible to cover in one day. Not only did they have to set up camps along the way, but they would also be exposed to the flying devil beasts, which would become the army's fatal weakness. He did not have enough Sylvie to ensure that each supply team could avoid the demons' attacks. Usually, the logistics team made up of new recruits would be very tenacious after being attacked by the enemy, so Roland did not expect much. If the logistics line collapsed, the First Army might not even be able to retreat in one piece, let alone move an inch. However, it was precisely at this time that he could not show any hesitation. Make a plan first. We'll talk about other things after I read them. Yes, Your Majesty, Philin said with his hand on his chest. One day passed quickly, and the advisor department handed over the plan the next afternoon. And there were 2 copies. It was Edith Kant who reported it. You didn't sleep? Roland noticed that her eyes were slightly swollen. Everyone is rushing. How can I go back to rest alone? Edith shrugged. I'll just take it as atonement for my mistake last time. Is this a bit of a criticism? Roland waved his hand indifferently. Just tell me the conclusion. Yes. She pointed to the plan on the left side of the desk. If we march according to the normal method, the main army will definitely be noticed by the devil beasts. What they can do after that depends on the ability of the commander. Due to the lack of this information, the advisor department directly assumed the worst-case scenario and concluded that the First Army could achieve its goal, but it would be defeated by the demons. About half of the 5,000 troops can escape. The witches aren't in great danger. As long as they don't take risks out of desperation, they should be able to return. This deduction is really harsh. Roland rubbed his forehead. Is there a logistical problem? Yes, Edith said without any hesitation. The supply route was attacked by the demons, so the First Army had to divide its troops to protect it. However, it was impossible to completely contain the demons. With the casualties day after day, the morale of the troops will suffer and the confidence of the front line will be affected. A week later, the attacks of the demons will become more difficult to predict, and the main army will start to attack the demons' camps. This can be said to be the simplest part of the battle. Your army successfully destroyed the demons' outpost, but the rear was on fire. Neverwinter? No, it was a real fire. The demons noticed the abnormal behavior of the misty forest and decided to set it on fire. This will destroy the safe passage built by Miss Leaf, and if the transport route is increased by 3 times, the First Army will completely lose supplies and thus lose the advantage of firepower. Therefore, they can only choose to break through the encirclement and retreat. Edith coughed twice. Of course, we may have set the number of demons to be a little high, but that's still uncertain. Judging from the urgency of their actions, I'm afraid they won't give up the outpost easily. Roland could not help but laugh. It's fine if there are a lot of demons, But which bastard came up with the idea of setting the forest on fire? Your Excellency, the Light of Dawn, Edith said slowly. But according to our analysis, as long as enough time passes, the probability of the demons finding something wrong with the misty forest will increase, so we can't rule out this possibility. Although Roland was mentally prepared, he was a little depressed to see such a pessimistic deduction for the first time. What about the second one? Don't tell me it's the same result. You've been busy all night just to tell me that it's impossible? However, he also knew that if he wanted to compete with the demons on the fertile plains, he would have to face the problem of land transportation sooner or later. If he could easily send ammunition and food to the frontline soldiers, why would he need to work overtime to build a railway? Chapter 966. Oh. Roland raised his eyebrows. Tell me about it. Since the tequila-devouring worm can dig a tunnel through the impassable mountain range, then the barbarian underground won't be a problem for them. Edith stretched out 2 fingers. As long as 2 worm carriers work in parallel, they can dig a tunnel big enough for carriages to pass through. I specifically asked Minister Carr about this. His conclusion is that although the mud can't support an underground palace like the one in the 3rd border town, as long as we can ensure a certain depth, it shouldn't be a problem for them to pass through. How do we advance? We'll move at the same time as the main force of the First Army. The tunnel entrance will be located in the center of the camp and will be taken out by a shaft. We can set up tents above it and disguise it as an ordinary camp area. What happens after we evacuate? Close the shaft and restore the surface soil, but leave a ventilation hole for the passage to let in the wind. How long will it take? It'll take about half a month longer than the usual march. However, under the harassment of the demons, it'll be difficult for us to move at the usual speed. The biggest weakness of the First Army will also disappear. Looking down from the sky, the army will look like a fist, which will definitely attract all the demons' attention. Roland could not help but curl up the corner of his mouth. It seemed that after a night of thinking, the plan was quite mature. Did you come up with this idea? Sort of, Edith said frankly. But it was the result of the cooperation of many departments. In addition to the Ministry of Construction, the Arithmetic Academy also participated in it, but they didn't know the specific content of the second plan. Should he say that she was indeed the Pearl of the Northern region? The most difficult thing about this plan was not that she had come up with an idea, but that she had used all the available resources. It would have been difficult for an ordinary person to consider the monster-like worm carrier. The Arithmetic Academy was a newly established academy less than a year ago. Usually, apart from stargazing, it would only receive tasks from Roland. Edith had already tried to use more professional personnel to calculate the efficiency of the passage supply. This extraordinary field of vision was truly delightful. Also, for some reason, he faintly felt that at this moment, Edith seemed to be more outstanding than before, as if she had shed a layer of cover. Good job, Roland encouraged. Let's implement this plan. Yes. The Pearl of the Northern region paused for a moment. But I still have something to say. The second plan's result will still result in casualties, and the process will not be as easy as the Church's Battle of Coldwind Ridge. After all, the demons are the ones who have the upper hand. Before the First Army arrives at the destination, it's impossible for them to rely on the preset positions and blockhouses to defend themselves. So, you prefer to bide your time and wait for an opportunity? No, I prefer to bite this bone no matter what, she replied slowly. If the battle of divine will is really as cruel as the tequila people say, then a trial of blood and fire is absolutely necessary for the First Army. As for you, I always feel that you care too much about the lives of your soldiers, so much so that you have to consider every step carefully. But now that the enemy has been changed to an unknown demon, some things are beyond human control, so please be prepared. That's the feeling. Roland thought to himself. If it were in the past, she would not have said such words. If it were any other lord, it would have been considered offensive. Edith was so smart that she would not make such a low-level mistake on such a small detail. Is this a chain reaction from last time? But who cares? As long as she can serve me, everything else is irrelevant. I see. You may leave. Yes, Your Majesty. After Edith bowed and left, Nightingale appeared and said with a dissatisfied look, Is it wrong to care about the safety of your subordinates? She's overstepping her bounds. I don't think there's anything wrong with it, Roland said with a smile. But everyone has their own ideas. Listen to both sides. But in his mind he had another idea. The reason why he had to be as considerate as possible was that he could not afford any losses at present. These soldiers were not a mob of mercenaries and serfs. Almost every one of them could read and write, not to mention that some of the officers also had the ability to look at pictures and make reports. If they could reduce their losses, they would do their utmost to do so. When Nightingale was about to say something, the sigil of listening hanging on her chest suddenly glowed red. Roland's heart suddenly sank. Did the demons make a new move? The transmission time was very short. She almost immediately replied with her hand pressed on her chest, No, it's good news. The third batch of witches from Sleeping Island is expected to arrive in Neverwinter tomorrow evening. The leader is Lady Camilla Derry. So it was Tilly who sent the message through magic power. Roland breathed a sigh of relief. Go and tell Vendy to welcome them according to the reception standards of the first two batches. This should be the last batch of migrants, which accounted for almost half of the total number of witches on Sleeping Island. Now that the framework of sleeping spell had been established, he could rest assured that Vendy would be in charge of the statistics and the recruitment process. As for the rest of the witches, he believed that as time passed, they would sooner or later accept the fact that the kingdom of Grey Castle had become a new one. No problem. Nightingale seemed to have forgotten about the Pearl of the Northern region. When she was about to escape into the mist, Roland suddenly called her. Wait, the leader is Camilla? The witch who is going to go to the Celine with Joan? Yes, what's wrong? Let me think. Roland pondered for a moment. Didn't the previous situation deductions say that the demons always took the initiative? Maybe I can reduce the opponent's mobility advantage a little. Are the two related? Nightingale asked with a blank face. I'm not sure yet, but I have to try, Roland said with interest. When Camilla arrives, I need to talk to her in person. After entering the western region along the Redwater River, both sides of the river gradually turned brownish-yellow, which was the color of harvested straw mixed with soil. Judging from the thickness of the straw, this year was another bumper harvest. Andrea stood at the bow of the boat and took a deep breath in the cool autumn wind. The sun-baked farmland exuded a unique smell, which made her feel inexplicably relaxed and satisfied. She did not know whether it was the aftertaste of the bumper harvest or the anticipation of going home. Perhaps it was both. Don't they collect these things? A curious voice suddenly came from behind. They're obviously good kindling. Andrea turned around and found that the person who had spoken was a god's punishment witch named Carol. You know this. When she was a child, she had asked her father similar questions, such as why farmers collected the harvested straw and tied them into hills. At that time, her father had answered that it was to make a living. Chapter 967. At that time, she did not fully understand it. It was not until she was sent out of the city of Glow and went through a wandering journey that she realized the weight of the word life. However, Andrea did not expect to hear this question from the tequila survivors again. But, shouldn't I know? Carol blinked with a smile. No, I didn't mean that. Andrea said with slight embarrassment. I thought you ancient witches never cared about these trivial things. Because there were mortals taking care of everything? Carol leaned against the railing. In fact, I was no different from those mortals before. Andrea could not help but feel a little surprised. How come? Although there are essential differences between witches and mortals, how could the Union invest too much energy on weak witches? Unlike Phyllis and the others, my ability and magic power were at the lowest level after my awakening, so I was of no help to the tequila. Therefore, I was almost forgotten by the Union in the later stages of the war. She looked at the rolling waves of the river as if she was staring at her past self. During those days when I lost my subsidy, I lived with a group of mortals. After the city was breached, I relied on them to survive until the end. But in the battle in the Kingdom of Dawn, you didn't act like a non-combat witch at all. Even Ashes, an extraordinaire, might not be a match for her. Hundreds of years of training is enough to change everything. Carol spread out her hands and slowly clenched them. In fact, compared to my companions, I even feel a little lucky to become a god's punishment witch. At least it made me stronger, no longer ignored by others, and I have the ability to do something for everyone. Now that I met His Majesty, it's more like a reward. Andrea suddenly realized that Carol might not be talking to her for no reason. Why? Are you telling me this? Carol raised her head. Because I envy you. Andrea was stunned and looked at the god's punishment witch. With your ability, even in the era of the Union, you were a powerful combat witch. You've already awakened at such a young age, so you'll be one of the top tequila witches, the god's punishment witch said casually. You know what? At that time, my biggest desire was to join the blessed army and get Lady Natalia's blessing before the battle. You could easily achieve that. Now I've lost the possibility of becoming stronger, but you're still far from your limit. Carol paused for a moment. Although the more powerful you are, the more challenges you will encounter, and you will encounter many setbacks. Don't forget that no matter how bad your situation is, you will already be envied. Hearing this, Andrea suddenly understood. Carol was trying to comfort her. Faced with her father's belated apology, as well as saying goodbye to her childhood playmates and embarking on her return journey alone, she had indeed been exceptionally depressed for a period of time. It was only when she was getting closer to Princess Tilly that she gradually adjusted her mood. The god's punishment witches had obviously noticed this, so they chose to share their past experiences with her at this time. Yes, these twists and turns were nothing to the tequila survivors. As a witch, what she had gained was indeed much more than what she had lost. Thank you, Andrea said softly after a moment of silence. Carol shook her head. I'm just telling the truth. Then she straightened up and turned to walk toward the cabin. By the way, the question you asked before, Andrea said loudly to Carol's back. Stuffing the straw into the soil should be to fertilize the fields. After all, Neverwinter doesn't need it to make fire anymore. The god's punishment which did not look back but made a "I understand" gesture. Andrea could not help but smile. She turned to the direction of Neverwinter, and the expectation in her heart grew stronger. What is Princess Tilly doing now? Ashes must be around her. Shavy must miss her so much. I'll play cards all night to satisfy my craving. And the last time when I traveled with Lorgar, Maggie specially helped me inform them in advance. At this moment, she should still be wandering in the barren land with lightning, monitoring every move of the demons. Coo! A soft cry came from the sky. Is this an illusion? She seemed to have heard Maggie's cry. As soon as Andrea raised her head, she saw a sturdy pigeon descending from the sky and slapping her in the face. It's true. Except for Maggie, she could not find such a strong pigeon. Ahem, you've become heavier again. Andrea plucked the pigeon and spat out the feather in its mouth. Where are the demons in the northwest? Don't tell me you're slacking again. No, Coo. Maggie argued. His Majesty asked me to take you back, Coo. But I'll be there soon. I don't know, but I'm definitely not slacking. Maggie jumped onto the deck and transformed into a devil beast. The bow of the ship suddenly sank. Hurry up, they're already waiting for you, Coo. Afraid that the ship would capsize in the river, Andrea hurriedly climbed onto Maggie's back. Wait, who are they? Countess Spear and Lady Camilla, Coo. Maggie spread her wings and carried her to Neverwinter. The next meeting was not in the Witch Building or Roland's castle. An hour later, Maggie brought Andrea to the border city wall. Besides Spear Passy and Camilla Derry, Anna, Sylvie, Lightning, and Summer were also waiting for her on the grassland. His Majesty was also there. You asked her to take me back just to test the new weapon? After listening to Roland's explanation, Andrea could not help but put her hand on her forehead. Even if she didn't come, I could still arrive at the river dock tonight. But we can't afford to waste even a day. Roland briefly explained the news of the demon's movements. The first army will set off tomorrow. Before we reach the entrance of the tunnel, we must adjust this weapon specially made for you to a usable state. Is that so? Andrea frowned slightly. The demons always gave people a sense of impatience. There was still some time before the appearance of the bloody moon, but they seemed a little too active. However, any movement of the demons could not be treated as a trivial matter. It seemed that the all-night card game would have to be postponed temporarily. I see. She turned her head and looked at a strange gun in the crowd. It was too big to call it a gun. The barrel alone was as long as an adult. It did not look like a weapon that could be carried by a person in a march. If it was specially made for ashes, it might be possible. What the hell is this weapon? Chapter 968. According to Sylvie's intelligence, the demon reconnaissance team usually consisted of 2 mad demons and 3 devil beasts, and they would fly back and forth in the surveillance area at a certain frequency. There were overlaps between each team, which was similar to the Wall of Eagles in the future. Due to the visual advantage of aerial units, the army would definitely be discovered as soon as they entered the reconnaissance area. What Roland planned to do was to open up a no-fly zone in the sky, a blind spot. At present, it was certain that the mad demons had neither a radar system nor instantaneous calling technology. As long as they did not blow the horn, the disappearance of a small team would not attract any attention. The devil beasts that carried the red mist canisters could enhance the patrol ability of the team, but it would also take a long time for the information to return. By the time the enemy realized that the devil beasts had died, they would most likely have to wait until the night when they returned to their nest. Even so, it was not easy for the demons to immediately locate the attacker without knowing the exact location of the loss. Moreover, the first army could march at night even though the reconnaissance team could not move at night. As long as the blind spot was built in a reasonable order, it would buy time for the army, which would also weaken the enemy's mobility. Roland did not expect to completely stop the absolute hand. Even if he could delay it for 2 or 3 days, it would still be of great help to the army. After all, the earlier he arrived at the artillery site, the higher his chance of winning. And the anti-devil beast sniper rifle was the product of his high hopes. In fact, it was not exactly a gun. In order to ensure long-range lethality and ballistic stability, the caliber was set at 20 millimeters, which was the dividing line between a gun and a cannon. As for why it was not bigger, it was because Andrea's ability had a distinct feature. It could only be used by hand. This had been tested during the artillery training. Once she let go of the barrel, the soldiers would not be able to fire no matter how hard they tried to adjust. But to forcibly fire under the recoil of the cannon? It would be strange if Tilly did not get angry. However, the name sniper cannon was too awkward, so Roland decided to call it a gun. The new weapon itself did not have any advanced technology. Its structure was much simpler than that of the Mark I HMG, with air conduction recoil, semi-automatic firing, magazine feeding. The only extra part was a muzzle brake to reduce the recoil, which was also used on the main guns of shallow water gunships. It only took 2 days to make it. 1.5 days were spent on selecting materials and post-processing. Lucia had formulated the alloy, Anna had cut it into shape, Kendall had solidified it into shape, and Doris had demonized it. With the help of several witches, this weapon could definitely be considered a legendary creation in terms of quality. Not to mention the material and processing precision, as long as the solidification effect existed, the barrel of the sniper rifle would not deform under the high temperature of the gas and the tremendous pressure. This was also the key factor to ensure continuous accurate shooting. Is this a sniper rifle? Andrea looked at it for a while and soon found something wrong. Where's its scope? She asked. No. Roland shrugged. She was stunned. I can't hit a target that I can't see. And a normal scope can't play its role, so you need 3 other people to help you, Roland said and looked at Sylvie, Spear, and Camilla. You mean, Let Ms. Camilla connect me and Sylvie together, and the Countess will be responsible for replenishing magic power? Andrea finally understood what Maggie meant when she said, "They're waiting for you." Although I don't want to leave Fallen Dragon Ridge at all. But for the sake of His Majesty's sincere invitation, I can only reluctantly agree, Countess Spear said, pretending to be helpless. Countess Spear pretended to be helpless. But next time, I hope to inform you in advance, instead of letting Miss Maggie fly me around. I'm old, and my body isn't as healthy as it used to be. I still haven't recovered from the wind. Roland silently rolled his eyes. She had drunk Lily's purifying water and asked him for the next batch of support for City Hall students, but she made it sound like she was doing it for free. After all, he was a regular in politics for many years and was used to acting pitiful. Camilla's reaction was much simpler. Her Highness Tilly wants me to do my best. But I'm not sure if my ability will still work under the observation of the Eye of Magic. Andrea had never considered such a problem before, as the range of throwing stones and arrows was much smaller than the visual range. That's why it's necessary to try, Roland said. Let's begin. Carter Lannis paced nervously outside the bedroom door. He had rarely felt so uneasy in his life. No matter how she thought about it, apart from the moment when His Majesty approached the witch Anna without any warning, today was the second. His wife, May, was about to give birth. Just as she said, "Her status is the same as His Majesty's," Carter thought self-mockingly. Show some courage. Look at what you've become. Isn't it just giving birth to a child? Nana and Lily are here, and the medical center has sent several female nurses. What problem can there be? Even if it's a difficult birth, according to His Majesty, we can cut open the belly and take out the baby, which will save the lives of both of us. But soon after this idea came to him, he was shaken again. Can a person really give birth by cutting open the belly? That's terrible. No. I hope it's normal. Bastard, how dare you doubt His Majesty's knowledge? I've never heard of anyone giving birth like this. The two voices argued in the Chief Knight's mind, which almost made his head explode. Don't worry, Your Excellency, Irene comforted him. Sister May will definitely make it, because she's the strongest person I've ever met. The other members of the Starflower Troupe who came to visit also nodded. Thank you. Although Carter said that, the worry in his heart did not lessen at all. He felt a thin layer of sweat on his forehead as he struggled with all sorts of thoughts. Suddenly, there was a storm of cheers outside the window. He walked to the window and saw that under the cheers of countless people, a group of people wearing new military uniforms slowly walked through the long street, advancing towards the border wall. The brown and green fabric looked messy, but on these soldiers, they gave off a sense of steadiness that was as solid as a rock. The entire army was like a flowing land. Is today the day of the expedition? Carter could not help but ask. Yes, my husband is also in it. Irene smiled reluctantly, but full of pride. He's been looking forward to this revenge battle for a long time. Revenge? He asked subconsciously. To comfort those who died in the hands of the demons. That's what he told me. The former Star Knight would now fight for those ordinary people. The ideal country that His Majesty had mentioned in the past was now becoming a reality. He should have been one of them, and even the first person to fight for His Majesty. But he was getting further and further away from it. For a moment, annoyance replaced the conflict in his mind, and he was a little distracted. Until a childish cry came from the bedroom door. In an instant, all his thoughts became blank. His body reacted faster than his brain. When he came to his senses, he had already pushed open the door and rushed to the bedside. A wrinkled baby was crying beside May's pillow, and the nurses were methodically dealing with the aftermath. Congratulations, sir. It's a very healthy boy, someone said with a smile. Is it? Carr moved step by step to the head of the bed and knelt on one knee. He looked at May, who was sweating under the candlelight. For a moment, he was stunned. The endless cheers mixed with the cries of the children, like an ensemble celebrating the birth of a new child. May opened her mouth as if she wanted to say something, but she was so weak that she could barely make a sound. But Carter still understood what she wanted to say. At that moment, a warm feeling welled up in his eyes. Chapter 969. Northwest of Neverwinter, in the hinterland of the misty forest. Snaketooth felt that the past 1.5 months since he joined the railway construction team had been the most incredible period of his life. No, he thought, most was not the right word to describe it. Every once in a while, he would see something incredible. It was as if he had never really known Neverwinter. Snaketooth finally understood why all the workers here had to sign a confidentiality agreement. The agreement required them not to tell anyone about what they saw. It was a crime against the law of the kingdom to report or record what they saw. The lightest punishment would be a fine, confiscation of income, or even forced labor in the North Slope mine. The agreement also emphasized that those who were unwilling to abide by it could quit the construction team, but no one could escape the omnipresent law. The Kingdom's Security Bureau was in charge of the inspection, and no one could escape the omnipresent law. Snaketooth had once disapproved of the agreement. It was possible to be caught writing, but how could the oral report be flawless? If he could be arrested for every report, the project would not be able to proceed. But now, he had a completely different view. How many secrets were hidden in the city of Neverwinter under His Majesty's control? It might be far beyond his imagination. Perhaps, in a place that most people could not see, there was an astonishing power surging. What impressed him the most was the witches. Paper was also a witch, but in his eyes, she had always been someone who needed protection. He did not take it seriously when the church claimed that witches were evil people who had inherited the power of the demon. If they were really so powerful, why were they hunted by the church and did not even dare to show their faces? But this idea was changed by a witch named Lady Leaf. Snaketooth had never thought that someone could control the entire forest by herself. The construction team did not seem to enter the misty forest, but the belly of a wild beast. This was especially obvious when they were laying the railway. The vines formed a continuous net above the roadbed, and the rails were wrapped and dragged forward. When they reached the designated place, they dropped to the ground like fruits on vines. Wherever the railway was built, the trees on both sides would automatically separate, saving the effort of cutting down trees. At the same time, the canopy of the surrounding trees would be particularly dense, blocking the entire sky to avoid attracting the attention of the demons. Other than that, the forest could also actively attack the beasts that approached the construction team. If one day they could get a bowl of fresh meat soup, it must be some blind beast that trespassed into Lady Leaf's territory. Snaketooth was fortunate enough to have seen her once, but he was not sure whether Lady Leaf was still a human. Her entire body was a strange green color, and from afar, she looked like a gem. Moreover, it seemed to have no physical body when it moved, and it could freely move through the branches. In the past, he would have screamed in fright. With her ghostly movements and unimaginable appearance, it was not surprising that people would accuse her of being the devil's minions. At the time, the only thought in his mind was, "Thank goodness Paper isn't like this." However, Snaketooth didn't hate her at all. Instead, he admired her from the bottom of his heart. His Majesty had said at the award and honor ceremony that it was thanks to the witch Leaf that he was able to feed everyone in Neverwinter. Every person who was freed from hunger and hardship was a beneficiary of her ability. Just based on this achievement, Leaf should be remembered forever. Snaketooth was naturally one of the beneficiaries. Apart from the witches, the other discovery was probably his personal secret. It happened after the First Army entered the misty forest. Ever since the demons attacked Neverwinter, the call for a counterattack had become louder and louder. Even in the barbarian land, the workers were also discussing this issue. He was not surprised by the arrival of this day. Every day, a large number of soldiers went to the front. Obviously, His Majesty was going to take action. Unlike the cavaliers he had seen before, most of the soldiers on the expedition were acquaintances of the neighborhood, acquaintances of this or that, so that whenever an army passed by, the workmen lined the streets to welcome it, and the scene was very lively. He had thought that building a railway far away from the border would be a cold and dangerous chore, but it was not the case at all. Snaketooth, on the other hand, was much less experienced in this aspect. Therefore, he preferred to watch the train alone, and even climbed up to touch it when it stopped. However, what happened to him 2 weeks ago was horrifying. It was a locomotive with 6 carriages. It stopped at the section that he was responsible for building, which was the latest end of the railway. There were 2 huge objects piled on the roofless flatbed. One of them was more than 20 meters long and covered with a layer of canvas, so he could not tell what it was. This was normal. If the goods had nothing to do with the construction team, then they must be military supplies. He did not intend to find out what they were. However, Snaketooth had a stomachache that day. When he ran out of the tent in the middle of the night to find a place to relieve himself, he was shocked to see the canvas wriggle. Several warriors, who were obviously dressed differently from the soldiers of the First Army, untied the ropes that fastened the canvas, and a strong soft monster climbed out of it. However, what was even more shocking was that the monster actually spoke the human language, and its voice was actually quite pleasant to listen to. The first sentence was, "I'm hungry. Do you have food?" At that moment, Snaketooth felt his hair stand on end. He could almost imagine the warrior's cold reply, "Ah, yes. All the workers in this camp are food. Eat as much as you want." But it did not happen. The warriors hugged it affectionately, and then carried out ham, vegetables, and bread from the last carriage. All of them were packed in barrels as tall as a man. The 2 worms gobbled up the food and then disappeared into the depths of the forest with the warriors. Snaketooth did not even dare to breathe. He hid behind a tree until the footsteps faded away. When he was sure that they had left, his pants were already soaked with sweat. 2 days later, a strange station was built beside the railway. It was an arched building made of cement and bricks, and inside it was a bottomless hole. Although the workers went in and out, no one knew where it led to. Several steam engines were set up on both sides of the hole, constantly blowing air into it. It looked strange no matter how he looked at it. Snaketooth also kept this matter firmly in his heart. Snaketooth had thought that he would be scared and want to quit the railway construction team, but he recovered faster than he had imagined. This was an exciting life. This was the true face of Neverwinter. When he said goodbye to his companions and first came to the forest, he always felt like a bunch of rootless duckweeds, especially when his fellow workers received letters from their families and happily shared them with him. But gradually, he was attracted by all kinds of novel things, such as the perfectly connected smooth railway, the beautiful singing of the forest, the giant desert wolf that could appear and disappear mysteriously but would not be attacked by Lady Leaf, and the man who always came here to pray on certain days. He could not help but feel that he was getting closer to the unknown side of Neverwinter, and that he was gradually becoming one with the city. Snaketooth wanted to keep all these things in mind and wait to tell his friends one day. There was no better proof that he was an old citizen than knowing a city well. Even if he did not have many familiar neighbors, no one could deny it. The term of the confidentiality agreement was only 5 years. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.